Hey guys, what is up? I am back from my 3 week break. Where have I been? Well, I have not been posting just because I've been focusing entirely on All Japan's 2019 Champions Carnival, which, as you can tell by the title, I'm going to be reviewing. This entire tournament was 18 damn shows long. Just a few things out of the way first. I did promise a WrestleMania review, and you know what? To be honest, I just couldn't be bothered recording that, and I watched the entire show and I made notes for all of the matches, but then I was just like, oh, I'm trying to get some other stuff out, and at the time, I was just like, you know what, I can't be fucked. I don't even care about WWE that much in the first place, so why would I even bother doing this? I also promised to review some other shows, like Big Japan's Death Survivor Tournament and Wrestle One's Wrestle Wars shows, and, you know, look, I've promised so many reviews that I haven't followed through with, but look, I was certain I was going to be reviewing the Champions Carnival, and hey, here it is today, and this is my first time actually watching a Champions Carnival. Is it the Champion Carnival or Champions Carnival? God, I should have got that figured out. Either way, the CC, this is the first time I've actually watched a CC all the way through. Feels weird calling it that. This is the first time I've watched a carnival all the way through. And, you know, this was difficult at times, but I'm ultimately pretty happy that I sat through everything. And yep, that's right. I watched all of these matches. I watched every single block match. God, I didn't watch the random like undercard tag matches. That would fucking have killed me. But yeah, I watched every block match, and I'm not going to be talking about all of them, thank God, or else we'd be here for like, you know, 5 hours, because as I said, like what, 18 shows. I'm just going to focus on the matches that stood out to me, and I'm going to talk more about the ones that I cared more about, obviously. But I'm still going to try to give a few thoughts about some of the other matches, even if I didn't, you know, I'm not going to go totally in depth with the story and, you know, an analysis of the offense. So let's start off. Let's go to day one. Day one was from Korakuen Hall in Tokyo. The first match was Daichi versus Yoshida, and yeah, this was a short, mediocre strike affair. There wasn't any real energy or intensity. I was hoping for more. I haven't seen too much of Daichi Hashimoto, and to be honest, I was never really a big fan at all of Shinya Hashimoto. But the few moments I had seen from Daichi and some of his Big Japan work, I've been like, oh yeah, he's got some decent strikes in him. And Yoshida, he's been very entertaining for me in Dragon Gate. So I was hoping like, oh, we got two big, you know, strikers. Hopefully they can have a fun little match here. But it just felt like guys just going through the motions. No one was really willing to go all out on their first day, I guess, so I only gave this 2.25 stars. The next match, this was Jake Lee versus Naoya Nomura, so there was a decent strike exchange for a while, and I wasn't feeling too much at that point, but then Nomura, he started showing that awesome charm of his that we saw in his Triple Crown match against Miyahara back in, I think it was March, and that just put the match onto another level. And from there, both guys' strikes became even more impactful, and the power moves started coming out more frequently and in much more impressive form. Lee kept trying to hit the backdrop suplex, but Nomura was always able to either counter it or evade it, and the second time Lee went for it, Nomura was able to counter into, it was sort of like a butterfly lock, and then he transitioned that into sort of a cobra twist, and I believe this is now his new finisher, which is deemed the Nomura lock, so not too much creativity on the name, and he actually got the win off of this move, and the finish was a bit surprising, but it was a nice surprise, since it looked like Lee was all in control, especially after his running knee lift, but then Nomura came back and he won in a rather unexpected fashion, and, you know, the first half was a bit pedestrian, but the final few minutes were great. And it's funny because in my notes I say, look, give them more than 12 minutes and I'm sure they could give us a great match. And hey, wouldn't I fucking know it, they eventually got another 12 minutes for a match, and it was far, far superior, but I'll get to that, you know, towards the end of this massive review. So for this match, I gave this 3.25 stars to about 3.5 stars. I thought it was pretty good, but as I said, they needed to go longer. At least I thought they needed, you know, more time to give a better match. I would later be proven wrong, but at the time, that's what I thought. Then we had Atsushi Aoki versus Kento Miyahara. Aoki, he was replacing, I believe it was Kengo Mashimo, after Mashimo picked up an injury. And I had never been that interested in Aoki. Like, I thought he's had, you know, some good matches before, but I remember when I was focusing on him, it was when the All Japan Junior title was held by like Ultimo Dragon and Tajiri, and I was seeing Aoki have some matches with them, I think it was, and so he never really looked that impressive, but goddamn, he really, really impressed me in this tournament. So at the start, Aoki, he was immediately energetic and willing to engage with Miyahara, and I loved how Miyahara was constantly trying to manhandle Aoki, but Aoki would always respond with these like sneaky little pushes and a calculated use of his surroundings and just split-second movements that would always allow him to immediately regain control. We were seeing like a great story of the arrogant young prodigy in Miyahara up against the intelligent veteran Aoki, who just so happened to be a junior. And the match continued to develop in exciting ways as Miyahara started running through all of his finishing stretch, big move flurry attacks, yet Aoki was still intelligently using his speed and agility to evade Miyahara's attacks, and he was responding with his own big strikes and power moves as well. And I love the brutal blackout knees Miyahara was hitting Aoki with, and Aoki, he was continuing just to get to his feet. He was like trying his best to shake them off, and in the end, he ended up kicking out of Miyahara's bridging German suplex, And then the near falls Aoki was getting in the final few minutes, those were fantastic and very convincing, and I was so damn keen for Aoki to get the upset win. Like, I came into this match thinking, oh, okay, Aoki, he's a junior, we'll see if he can really hang with the heavyweights. And, at the end of this match, let alone at the end of this entire tournament, I was convinced, like, damn, if this dude goes, like, heavyweight full-time, I'd be in love with that. So, this match was just so good. We got a very short but dramatic moment in the finish as Aoki was desperate to break out of Miyahara's shutdown German, but eventually he did fall to it, as expected, and Miyahara got the win. So, this was so good. We had a very simple story of the arrogant yet skilled show-off versus the intelligent veteran, and it was just told with such a great variety of different details that it always felt interesting. It was also, of course, helped by the fact that the crowd was just going crazy for Aoki because they, like me, they knew, oh, Aoki, he's the junior, he's up against the heavyweight, not only a heavyweight, he's up against the ace of the company. So, Aoki was aided by that support, and his selling, like, of his desperation, it was just fantastic. So, I really enjoyed this. This was very good. I went 3 3/4 stars on this. The next match, this was between Joe Doring and Suwama. This was the sort of Doring match that I can't get into, and sadly this would be his usual sort of performance throughout the Champions Carnival. It was, a lot of brawling, some slow glancing strike trades, and some unremarkable power moves. Luckily the match did eventually pick up as the power moves and strikes started having a lot more impact behind them, and both guys started showing a lot more heart in their facial expressions, and Suwama, he was showing effort at all parts of the match, even in the slow first 5 minutes. It's just a shame that the Bulldog choke, which Suwama used to eventually finish the match, it was pretty anticlimactic. Like, I haven't been following All Japan very diligently, but I haven't seen Suwama use that as a finishing move before, and so I was, caught off guard. I was like, oh, okay, I guess the match is over, but, I do appreciate that because Suwama's so used to using, wearing his opponents down with his strikes and power moves, and then hitting, I think it's either the last ride or the backdrop suplex, so this was a nice change. And the match improved at the end, but being that this was only 9 minutes, and the first 5 minutes were pretty dull, I can't rate this too highly since I'm not really a fan of slow brawls, so I gave this 2 3/4 stars. The main event, and at the time when the first night of the Champions Carnival came out, this was a very highly regarded match. This was Shuji Ishikawa versus Yuji Okabayashi. So these two have had my favorite interactions in the 2 Violent Giants versus Strong BJ matches this year. So, like, right away, we got big muscly exchanges with all these super energetic shoulder barges, and even, like, relatively minor sounding sequences and spots, like Ishikawa just dumping Okabayashi on the apron and, hitting a double stomp from him. Sorry, how did I word that? I worded that weirdly, like hitting a double stomp on him. Like, they don't sound that crazy, but with just the crowd going wild for all of the energy that these guys came out the gate with, those moments were just incredibly hype. And Ishikawa, he remained in control for a while with some great clobbering strikes and really solid holds. It was just awesome seeing Okabayashi slowly fire up and become more desperate to pay Ishikawa back, and Ishikawa would constantly just regain control, and this would just allow Okabayashi to continue showing off his fantastic babyface charisma, and this would just continue to build up for his further, fiery comebacks, which did eventually come. And when they did come, they were fantastic. The timing and the impact of Okabayashi's chops and lariats were just perfect. And Okabayashi, he suddenly started no-selling Ishikawa's massive power moves, which was, like, for me, it was like, okay, I'm enjoying all the hype we're getting from these, 2 big beefy lads, but that was a bit too much. I'm not a big fan of no-selling, especially if the stakes for the match aren't that big, considering this was only the first night. But I was able to look past it because it did fit into the story of Okabayashi becoming more and more passionate and determined as the match went on, and both guys did a great job showing the extent of their exhaustion while still showing their intention to stand up to each other's strikes and then blast each other with their own strikes. Ishikawa continued crushing Okabayashi with strikes and power moves, and I was pretty certain that Okabayashi would fall to, like, every next pinfall that came, yet somehow he just kept kicking out of everything and just rising to his feet and firing up. God, it was great. And it was also so damn endearing the way Okabayashi would just scream his head off and pull a pose every time he would get back up. And when I say pull a pose, I don't mean, I don't know, like on a runway or something. I mean, like, like you're showing his muscles and, screaming, that sort of thing. Like, a dominant pose, a strong man's pose. And it was as if he was just trying to, constantly remind the audience, like, hey, don't count me out yet. I'm always going to get back to my feet. And the great strikes, they somehow just continued to come out, though in slower and more heavy fashion, which was still enjoyable. And Ishikawa, he remained largely in control, but Okabayashi was starting to put together a bunch of, like, consecutive attacks, and eventually he fulfilled his comeback as he hit the golem splash from the win. So this was yet another very good match, a hard-hitting strike strike fest, and strong selling all around. I didn't see anything groundbreaking, and at times I thought this was a great match, but I guess just because it felt like the guys were going over the same few sequences every now and then, so it felt a bit derivative, I guess. Is that the right word? Yeah, a bit like sort of repetitive, but I still really enjoyed this. I gave this 3 3/4 stars. So yeah, final thoughts for the first night. I'll give this a 7 out of 10. We had 2 very good matches, 1 pretty good match, and one bad match and 1 meh match, one that's sort of skippable. But Okabayashi versus Ishikawa and Miyahara versus Aoki are must-watch matches. I definitely recommend them. The second day of the tournament was from Kisaraju in Shiba, I believe that's how it's pronounced. The first match of the show was Daichi Hashimoto versus Joel Redman. This was Redman's first, but definitely not his last chance to show off his impressive technical work in this Champions Carnival. And even though a lot of his matches in this carnival weren't, like, none of them were, outright great, but none of them were, like, even what I'd call very good, but he was always very solid, and so I was really into him in this first match. And we had Daichi. He was still just going through the motions with his strikes, and Daichi did end up getting the win, I believe. So yeah, this wasn't anything too special. I thought Redman looked good. He would look better further on as the tournament progressed, so I only gave this 2 1/4 stars. The next match was between Dylan James and Ryuji Sai. This had some fine strike exchanges, but it could have been way better if either guy decided to up their intensity, because it sort of just looked like, once again, they're just going through the motions. So I only gave this 2.5 stars. We then had Yuji Okabayashi versus Yuma Aoyagi. God, I forgot Aoyagi's first name. So yeah, we had a pretty hot, intelligent start from Aoyagi as he unloaded with strikes, and he evaded all of Okabayashi's big chops. So they're sort of going for the story of the monster powerhouse Okabayashi up against the speedy small guy, with Aoyagi trying to outrun and outsmart Okabayashi. Okabayashi, of course, looked fantastic once he did finally gain control, and he showed off his immense strength and size advantage. Aoyagi played the endangered babyface, I guess I'll call it. He played that very well, and he looked appropriately desperate when he got his hope spots. Okabayashi got the win with his beastly looking camel clutch, and this is genuinely one of my favorite holds in all of pro wrestling, because like, we have Zack Sabre Jr., who's like, they take like 4 limbs and bend them into a pretzel, and like, if you've heard my New Japan reviews, I'm not the biggest fan of Zack Sabre Jr., and it's just like, damn, it makes me pine for a time where it's like, just apply a classic hold like a Boston Crab, or here with Okabayashi, a camel clutch, and just make the hold look like $1,000,000. You don't have to go complex with your holds, just take a basic hold and just put so much emotion into it, and that's exactly what Okabayashi does. So yeah, this was a short match, only 5 minutes, but there was a lot of story packed into that time and solid performances from both guys, and of course I really enjoyed the finish, so I gave this 2 3/4 stars. The next match was between Atsushi Aoki and Shuji Ishikawa, so immediately the immense size difference was being played up. Aoki, he knew he was no match for Ishikawa in terms of pure wrestling. Well, I say pure wrestling, I guess in more strikes, because Aoki is a bit more technical than Ishikawa. And anyways, Aoki, he started trying to, I guess, outthink him, I guess I'd describe it. He was remaining elusive and going for surprise attacks, and Ishikawa would pretty easily regain control and continue totally bullying him. And Aoki's selling was, of course, very sympathetic, given the visual of the monster Ishikawa just, towering over him and dominating him and standing up when Aoki's just lying down on the mat. And Aoki then started putting together some quick successive strikes to try wear Ishikawa down, and he was having some success alongside some roll-ups that he likewise got pretty close with, but Ishikawa just battered Aoki with quite a few big power moves, and then he hit the knee lift for the win. So this was sadly far too short, but it was quite good, with a nice little story of the hungry junior versus the monster. It was pretty similar in that regards to Okabayashi versus Aoyagi, with the guy who's sort of a junior, Aoki who's actually a junior, and Aoyagi, who I guess probably should be a junior given the look of him, up against the monster, in this case Ishikawa, and before it was Okabayashi. So I enjoyed this, it was decent, but as I said, needed to go longer. I gave this 3 stars. The next match, now I didn't expect to really enjoy this as much as I did. This was Naoya Nomura versus Yoshida. I'm forgetting Yoshida's first name. Is it Takayuki? Or Takia? Oh, I can't remember. Anyways, Cyber Kong, that guy who screamed a lot in Dragon Gate. So this was a strike fest right away, and it lasted like that for a good while. Nomura was great as always with his, energetic, passionate expressions, and Yoshida was, sort of the same, but he was playing up his more psychopathic character, and that was how he decided to channel his energy. And Yoshida, he started grinding Nomura down with various holds, as well as some questionable and outright illegal tactics, and the big delayed strike exchanges slowly started coming out, and that was when both guys were really hammering away at each other, and just showing their true spirit. And Nomura, he was still just so damn good with his forearms, and I could totally connect with the passionate display he was putting on, which is exactly the reason why he's now become, especially after this tournament, he's now become one of my favorite wrestlers in all of All Japan. Like, genuinely, it's between Nomura and Zeus, and I think Nomura may have surpassed him just with his amazing performances these last like 4 months. And Nomura, he was firmly in control, but Yoshida was still kicking out of pretty much everything Nomura was throwing at him, and he even had enough energy to fire back and hit his own big moves. There were plenty of great near falls, and I was certain the match was over, like no joke, maybe 7 times, especially when it looked like Nomura was the one who was about to eat the pin. And Nomura, once again, he was just fantastic with those very late kickouts, and he eventually hit the maximum for the win. And that felt very, like, super deserved after how long and just how desperately he had been fighting for. So I gave this 3.5 stars. This is the sort of match where it's like, you know, it sounds good on paper, but because of that, you expect it to be disappointing. And it wasn't blow away, but, you know, I really enjoyed this. It was a, you know, very solid, good match. As I said, 3.5 stars. So overall thoughts for the second night, I'd give this like a 5 out of 10, mostly just because of the severely underwhelming first few Carnival matches. Aoki versus Ishikawa and Okabayashi versus Aoyagi were decent for their time, but Nomura versus Yoshida was the only real recommendation here. The third day of the tournament was from Nagoya and Aichi, and the first match was between Gianni Valletta versus Zeus. And this was the first Valletta match we got, and sadly it would not be the last. Valletta's match style is basically just he messy brawls like hell, and he is generally incredibly unlikable. You know, his brawling isn't very interesting, and he does this thing where I guess his gimmick is like he screams, and it's almost like he's starting his own chant. And for some reason, you know, I guess the Japanese people are just very kind, because they would pretty much always join in, maybe out of sympathy, maybe out of because they didn't want it to be awkward with a wrestler going for a reaction, not getting anything. But Zeus luckily got the win. I didn't really enjoy this. Then we had Daichi Hashimoto versus Jake Lee. We got some mediocre strike exchanges without too much energy from either guy. Wasn't too into this. I gave this 2.5 stars. I don't know if I gave a rating for Valletta versus Zeus, now that I think of it. I gave that 1 3/4 stars. So yeah, I wasn't very keen on that. And for Daichi versus Lee, as I just said, 2.5 stars. Then we had Ryuji Sai versus Shuji Ishikawa. This was a terribly, awfully drawn out 30-minute time limit draw. If this went 15 minutes, this would have been, you know, decent, but even considering, you know, the time limit draw, which was like the fact it went that long wasn't the main issue. It was just because they knew they were going that long, so they were just going over the same sequences over and over. There was really no energy or intensity behind the exchanges themselves. Their strikes were rather weak. Yeah, this was sadly bad. I only gave this 2.25 stars. I've seen some people go even lower on this. I can't really blame them. This was really difficult to sit through. The next match was between Joe Doring and Yoshitatsu. I remember Yoshitatsu's work being fine, but he was getting absolutely zero from Doring, who continued to be, you know, very underwhelming. I only gave this 2 stars. So yeah, the third day of the show, of this tournament, pretty terrible. I gave this a 3 out of 10. The best match here was 2.5 stars. And the 2 big matches that should have been good were pretty much outright bad. Absolutely skipped this night, except for, I guess, the feel-good moment of Yoshitatsu, like if you want to see that, because, you know, I appreciate Yoshitatsu. He came from New Japan, where he wasn't really respected and he wasn't that good, and he's definitely improved in All Japan, and seeing him celebrate his win in the main event, you know, I couldn't help but smile at that. The fourth night of the tournament was from Matsui in Shimane. I believe that's how it's pronounced. I probably butchered that again. The first match was between Dylan James and Gianni Valletta. This was another Valletta special with, you know, brawling, cheating, and ref bumps. Again, I wasn't that into it. Valletta receives his second 1 3/4 stars rating from me. The next match was Jake Lee versus Joel Redman. Redman continued impressing with his technical work. Lee sadly looked kind of bored for a while. He eventually became more focused, and that was when the match ended up being a bit more interesting, and it ended up being decent, luckily, just because I like the dynamic of Redman's technical work against Lee's strikes. So I did go 3 stars on this, but yeah, I wasn't super, like, I would go into my notes, because I did make sort of extensive notes on this, but I just can't really be bothered. The next match was Naoya Nomura versus Sam Adonis. This was the first match for Adonis in the Champions Carnival, and his style ended up basically being like typical heel, you know, posturing and brawling, but it isn't messy brawling like Gianni Valletta, and he at least had a bit more athletic offense too, but sadly he got too much screen time, and Nomura didn't really look that impressive as a result. I only gave this 2.5 stars because it did like the minimum you expect for a match to be, you know, watchable, and it wasn't outright boring, but it did have some moments that were a bit awkward. Like there was one botch where Adonis was, I think he was expecting a spear and Nomura didn't go for it, and that was pretty awkward, but yeah, another skippable match. Then we come to Miyahara versus Zeus. I still haven't seen the highly acclaimed second match from October last year. That was a match where Miyahara won back the Triple Crown title, but I did see their first match where Zeus won the title, and that was great, so I was expecting great things here as well. So both guys, they were teasing some big moves before, like moving into some pretty basic brawling segment with Miyahara in control, and the match picked up as Zeus finally started busting out his big strikes, and this forced Miyahara in turn to start bringing out his own more interesting side, as then he realized he was not only losing control, but, you know, Miyahara the wrestler and Miyahara the person would have realized, oh shit, I'm being outshone by this Zeus motherfucker. And Miyahara, he continued, you know, posing, and his excessive desperation for crowd support really continues to wear me down, and I think I've realized that's why I just continue to fail to connect with Miyahara on a serious level, because he's meant to be like, you know, this like underdog babyface ace, but then he comes out and he's so desperate for attention that it just comes off as really unappealing. So, and this isn't the first time I'm gonna criticize Miyahara during this review, just so you guys know. Anyways, after the spot on the apron, both guys are immediately into the big moves, you know, trading sequence territory, and Miyahara, he's at his best at these moments where he just throws out like these moves at a blistering pace, and Zeus just continued to show off his fantastic selling and bumping while, you know, responding with his own big moves and big power moves and strikes, and we're getting a lot of convincing near falls at this point, and I'm still loving the dynamic with Miyahara's more sharp attacks against Zeus's more heavy attacks, and Zeus continues to withstand a bunch of Miyahara's blackout knees before finally hitting the jackhammer and getting the win. So this isn't their best match, but this was still very, very good. These two can pretty much never go wrong, so I gave this 3 3/4 stars. For my overall thoughts of the fourth night of the Champions Carnival, I have to give this like a 5 out of 10, because even though the main event was very good and Redmond versus Lee was solid, the other two matches were very forgettable. We did have at least the best match since day one in Zeus versus Miyahara, so a very strong recommendation for that. For day 5, this was from, let me check, day 5, this was from Hiroshima, and the first match was Joel Redmond versus Sam Adonis, so two of the Gaijin going up against each other. I remember Redmond showing off more of his fine grappling work here, and that's about it. I've given this 2 3/4 stars. I don't really remember much about it, but I guess I really enjoyed the dynamic of, you know, Redmond's technical work against. I think I remember Adonis's technical work being like decent as well, and it probably added a bit of charm to the match that he was probably showing off his heel work. So yeah, still not really a match I'd outright recommend, but I don't think it was, you know, bad, obviously. The next match then was Yuma Aoyagi versus Zeus. There was a nice dynamic with Zeus's just, you know, powerhouse power against Aoyagi's speed and agility. Zeus's offense just continued to look very damaging, especially his strikes, and while Aoyagi's own offense isn't really anything special, in fact, I'd actually go outright and say he looks sort of awkward in the ring at times, it's more just the way he so confidently and passionately carries himself, like that helps him get over, and that just makes him very easy to connect to, and the crowd obviously reacts to him, you know, like you see him come out and he swings like his bloody, like, sweat rag or whatever, and like the crowd's doing it, like there's like little kids run up to him on the side and they're swinging it, because, you know, it's like, hey Aoyagi, I'm doing that thing you do, can you give me a high five? So yeah, he connects with the fans, and, you know, I connect with him. I don't think he's anything great, at least yet, but I definitely see there's a lot of charm to him. And Aoyagi, he got a pretty big win here as he locked in the guillotine after countering Zeus's attempted jackhammer. So yeah, that was very surprising. It was pretty cool. He was pretty good at you know, performing the run-on sequences with Zeus, and then we get that shock win. And the hold was in for such a long time that a finish felt rather believable, because, you know, if you have the longer a hold's in, the more likely you feel like, oh, this is going to finish a match. But just as likely, it's more likely that they're just doing that purely for drama, and eventually the guy in the hold is going to get the ropes or something. But yeah, so it was nice continuity, because Aoyagi, he failed to properly lock in the guillotine against Okabayashi on day 2. So now that he's beaten Zeus with it, we have reason to have, you know, believe in the credibility of the hold going forward, since, you know, Zeus is a relatively popular wrestler in All Japan. He's not just someone that All Japan would throw out there and, you know, have submit to any sort of move. So yeah, if the match had gone on longer, or if Zeus had been allowed to show off more of his strikes and power moves, then I would have been higher on this, but this was, you know, still pretty decent for its time, so I gave this 3 stars. The next match was Joe Doring versus Naoya Nomura. This was one of the more decent Doring matches in the tournament. Nomura went at Doring right away, but of course Doring's immense size allowed him to gain control, and he just started bullying Nomura. Nomura bumped and generally sold pretty well for Doring's attacks, and it was just making him into a very sympathetic figure up against, you know, this evil Gaijin monster. And you got to think, Nomura is already like incredibly sympathetic, and then he's up against this massive Doring, especially because I don't really like Doring that much. It was just made it very easy to cheer for him. Nomura's fire-up moments were great as always, and it's just filled with so much physical energy energy, and yeah, there's just a lot of passion behind his expressions. He was a lot more active here than he's been in his previous matches, and his strikes and selling and bumping were coming across a bit more effort here. I guess I describe it, compared to at least his previous matches, as I've said. Doring eventually got the win with his massive crossbody finisher, which I love as a finisher, because, you know, I believe like a few years ago it was just used as a signature move, and it'll be like a good tease for a near fall, but for the last, I want to say maybe 2 years. Is it that long? Maybe only a year. It's been used as just like a flat out finisher. And yeah, I really enjoyed that. The match wasn't anything special, but it was solid. And, you know, Nomura, he continued to look good. And Doring finally impressed instead of just looking mediocre. So I've given this 3 stars. The main event was Suwama versus Yoshitatsu. There was a fun story with Yoshitatsu, who was desperate to engage, but he was always losing out to Suwama's size and power advantage. So, you know, he's desperate to, you know, get the match going, but whenever he does get going, he just, you know, he can't catch a break. There was a nice dynamic with Yoshitatsu being more speed and agility based, whereas Suwama isn't very mobile, but he could just easily, you know, smack Yoshitatsu down with a single strike. And Yoshitatsu, he tried fighting back all match long, but he never really managed to put together any meaningful offense. And because Yoshitatsu wasn't pushing back too heavily against Suwama, Suwama sadly didn't get to show too much of his great selling or the true extent of his power, because like the peaks of Suwama usually only ever shine through when he's up against an equally great opponent. And I do think Suwama himself is great, but if you're going to put him up against, you know, Yoshitatsu, you're not going to get like a 4+ star match. The match picked up as expected when things leveled out, and that was when we saw both guys getting desperate with their headbutts, and they were even trading German suplexes with some no-selling spots. And, you know, again, the no-selling felt a bit forced, but it was sort of spiking this match up, you know, giving us a bit more juice, so, you know, I couldn't really blame it at that point. Suwama would end up thumping Yoshitatsu with all of his usual signature moves, including, you know, the drop kick, lariat, and the backdrop suplex, but Yoshitatsu surprisingly survived all of it. And it was a shame that Yoshitatsu's offense and bumping was a bit off during the finishing stretch, but I did like how his second extended Koji clutch sequence, it felt like a believable finish, and in fact, you know, wouldn't you know it, it ended up giving Yoshitatsu the submission win. So that was sort of similar to, oh god, who was it I was talking about before? Was it Lee? It was like Nomura or Lee or someone who had a submission sequence, and it was like, oh, the longer it's in, the more believable it becomes. And yeah, there was another instance where it was like, okay, I'm actually buying into the submission hold, and then it actually finishes it. So I enjoyed that. I get that this was the main event, and it was a decent enough match, but this did not need to go 20 minutes, but it still had an enjoyable enough second half, so I'd give this 3 stars. So my overall thoughts for the 5th night, I have to give this, you know, sadly a 5 out of 10 again. It's not the worst day of the tournament, that's still day 3, but it was pretty forgettable. There are no outright bad matches, and the final 3 matches were all decent, but there's nothing you need to see. Day 6 was from Fukuoka. We started with Valletta versus Aoyagi. This was sadly another Valletta special, complemented slightly by the fact that Aoyagi is, you know, an endearing babyface, but I couldn't really get too into this. Once again, I'm just not into the messy brawling style and the heel work of Valletta, even if he is meant to be a totally detestable heel. I'm sorry, I just can't get into it. And, you know, as I said, Aoyagi, his babyface charm did sort of shine through and stop this match being terrible, so I gave this 2.25 stars. The next match was between Lee and Yoshitatsu. So both guys, they went through the motions for a while, constantly, you know, changing up the pace without ever doing anything too exciting. Lee eventually woke the match up, thankfully, as he started targeting Yoshitatsu with various strikes and showing off his more arrogant and aggressive side. And Yoshitatsu didn't really do too much for me on either offense or defense, but I continue to appreciate Lee's no bullshit attitude, which added a lot of weight behind all of his attacks and movements. Sometimes Lee's arrogance comes off like as boredom, I guess, so I can easily be like either up or down on him, depending on like very slight variables in how he expresses himself and how he carries himself. And Lee was clearly holding back with his attacks, but they did still look pretty damn good. You know, it's Lee, he's like, what, 6'4", you know, like even if he's kicking you and holding back, that's still gotta, you know, bloody hurt. And I did think in the finishing stretch, he looked pretty good. You know, he had a series of running knees, and then he hit the backdrop suplex for the win, so that was pretty fun. There wasn't anything special about the work here, but it was solid, and both guys did work hard. Lee was good, and Yoshitatsu was pretty forgettable, sadly, but, you know, he wasn't outright bad. As I said, he did still work hard, so I gave this 3 stars. We then had Sam Adonis versus Suwama. This was another Adonis special. I like that I'm just calling, like, when I don't like someone's match, I call you, like, the insert name here special. So this was another, you know, Adonis special with Adonis playing up his cheeky heel character, which does nothing for me, sadly. And Suwama didn't even really get to show off his great selling or offense. And I think it was actually, yeah, I'm just looking at my notes, it was Adonis who got a ref bump assisted low blow and then a lariat and a fisherman buster for the win. So, you know, a bit of an upset over the ex-ace of All Japan, and I gave this 2.25 stars. The next match was between Dylan James and Miyahara. I did expect this to be better than it, you know, was, but it was still a decent match. So there was a nice beatdown by James, there was entertaining bravado shown by Miyahara as usual, and the match did pick up once James's strikes came. James's? Sorry, it's just a weird way. I've had this, you know, people's names, because my name ends with an S, you know, Lewis's. Sorry, do I cut this out? I'll just leave it in. Anyways, the match picked up once James's strikes came through, and James's general beatdown, it sort of lost my interest, sadly. Like, that's the more, like, brawling, beatdown sort of style I'm talking about. But his actual strikes, like, the pure chops and lariats themselves, they were always really, really hard-hitting, so I always enjoyed those. The match picked up for a second time when Miyahara, he started his comeback, and at this point, both guys were, sort of slowly moving to trading big bombs, and that was fun, but it was a bit too slow for my liking, so they never really got that frantic pace that, I really love in a Miyahara match. The match just continued with that structure for ages, and I was also sadly sort of losing interest just because of that, and the match finally ended after Miyahara hit the shutdown German suplex, and I was glad, because even though I was enjoying this match, it was going on a bit too long for my liking. I enjoyed a lot of individual moments, but sadly I didn't feel like the match flowed together very well. It was still decent, so I gave this 3 stars. So overall thoughts for day 6, another 5 out of 10 show, another pretty forgettable night of the carnival, probably on the low end on the main event, but I just couldn't get into it, and I realized that both guys were working hard, but the way they structured the match was just so repetitive without any like major development, so it sadly held it back. It wasn't a bad match, as I said. I gave it 3 stars, and I would probably recommend it just because I think other people will get way more out of it. Like, I've seen some people go like 4 stars, so yeah, but for me it was 3 stars, and this was another pretty forgettable night of the carnival. Day 7 was from Osaka. We started with Joel Redmond versus Naoya Nomura. There was very nice grappling work from Redmond as usual, and he also introduced some power moves, which we really hadn't seen from him thus far in the tournament, so I enjoyed that little minor development to his offense, his game. Nomura sadly never really got to impress that much, which was a shame, because, I was like, oh, okay, Nomura's got, heart, passion, some decent strikes and power moves. How's he going to work against, a more technical guy like Redmond? But this was mostly just the Redmond show. He was mostly in control, and he ended up getting the win, so it made sense why he was dominant for so long. But yeah, as I said, I enjoyed Redmond's work. Nomura was solid, but didn't really shine through, so I only gave this 3 stars. The next match was Shuji Ishikawa versus Yuma Aoyagi. Aoyagi had a strong showing early on, but obviously Ishikawa, he eventually gained control. When have you heard that before? The story of the smaller guy starting off strong, but then the bigger guy gaining control. You've never heard that before. And yeah, Ishikawa just started mercilessly bullying Aoyagi because of the size advantage. These two didn't have the most exciting exchanges or the most interesting chemistry, but I bought into Aoyagi's struggle, as I always do, just because even though he's sort of awkward in the ring, he's just got one of those faces where it's like, damn, I just want to cheer for you, dude. I just want the best for you. And the match did pick up as Ishikawa's big strikes and power moves started coming out, but yeah, this is nothing special, but solid enough. I don't say in my notes, but I'm pretty sure Ishikawa got the win, because I can't imagine Aoyagi having tapped him out, because that's the only way I would have gotten the submission, right, with his guillotine. But yeah, I gave this 3 stars. The next match, this was Valletta versus Sai. Can I say Valletta special again? Because, it was already bad enough that Valletta was in control for so long, but Sai's offense just never looked that good either, so there wasn't much either way. So this is Valletta's, I believe, his 3rd 1 3/4 star match. So, props to Valletta. He's setting all sorts of records here on Pure Grade Puroresu. Then we have Sawama versus Yoshida. We had a brawl to start with, and Yoshida, he was playing his role as the outsider here well, and he began targeting Sawama's leg, being like, oh, I'm the bad guy, I'm going after the X-Ace, his leg, I'm going to wear him down, I'm going to hate all you fans, that sort of stuff. He was playing that side up. It was pretty entertaining. Sawama, he did a pretty good job selling the leg while attempting to deliver his usual offense, and Yoshida just continued to dominate, and Sawama continued to just sell, and that's decent, but the structure remained the same for so long that it made the match sort of stagnant. Sawama's power moves eventually came out, and that looked pretty decent, but then there was a clear botch where I guess Yoshida was meant to escape the last ride. Like, Sawama's got him up for like a power bomb the last ride, and I think Yoshida was meant to roll out of it or counter or something, because it just led to a really very awkward bump where Yoshida just like basically lay down after Sawama sort of dropped him, and it looked really awkward, but then Sawama finished him off instead with the backdrop suplex. So yeah, excluding that rather awkward excluding, I guess, maybe a few of the first dull minutes and that very awkward finish, this was another decent match that sadly didn't really do anything too extra for me, so I gave this 3 stars. The next match was Dylan James versus Zeus, and this was the exact beefy strike exchange that I hoped it was. Zeus is he's such an endearing babyface. Just the way he grits his teeth and he just stands up to James, all while showing, his shocked expressions when he's dealing with James's own attacks. Yeah, there's just great energy, great selling all around as the match progresses. Zeus just finally hit the jackhammer for the win. He'd been trying for a while, and yeah, this was a pretty good match. It never really reached greatness territory, but it was very fun and intense. I haven't gone as in depth with my notes for this, as you can tell, just because it's like when two guys are just, throwing strikes and power moves, how many times can I just, put that in my notes before it becomes redundant? So yeah, this was a fun match. I gave this 3.5 stars. And final thoughts for day 7. This was the first show in quite a while, I think, where I've given it more than, a mediocre rating. I gave this a 6 out of 10, so a pretty good day. There's only one match that was properly good, which was obviously James versus Zeus, but everything else was decent except for Valletta versus Sai, which I recommend you avoid. Day 8 was also from Osaka. We started with Doring versus Adonis, so this is the Doring special this time instead of the Adonis special, just because Adonis was at least energetic at times, and his offense is a bit more athletic, but Doring he did nothing once again, and he didn't look very good at all. At least Adonis's character, like the fact that he's a heel, it excuses him from looking good because, hey, he's meant to be a heel, he's meant to be unlikable, which, say what you want about that being an excuse. At least it is an excuse. But, with Doring, he's meant to be, the second coming of Stan Hansen. I feel like we say that about all big gaijins who wrestle in Japan. That's probably not fair, but, he's in All Japan where Stan Hansen, made a massive name for himself. I expect to see some Hansen-level performances, but we just haven't been seeing that. So, yeah, this was 2.25 stars. Very disappointing. Not even that I expected that much, but I expect more from Doring than what he gave us. Anyways, the next match was Redmond versus Yoshida. I barely remember anything about this at all, but I'm just going to go out on a limb and I'm going to assume, Redmond's grappling probably continued to look good without really developing, and I'm going to assume Yoshida's strikes were probably, relatively stiff at times, and his psychotic character with the constant screaming, it was probably entertaining, and I did rate this 2.5 stars, so yeah, can't really say too much about it. The next match was Ryuji Sai versus Zeus. So both guys, they were getting in each other's faces right away, right before the bell, and was immediately seeing this very fun, intense atmosphere. And then the stiff strikes just started being traded, and I was like, okay, this is a decent match. And the match just became more and more intense as time went on, with the strikes continuing to just increase in how stiff they were. They never really picked things up to the next level to become a great match, but the level they remained at was pretty fun. And I didn't make any more specific notes because this is sort of similar to Zeus versus, was it James? Where I was like, how many times can I just say, oh, they traded strikes and they were stiff and it was cool. Oh, they hit power moves and it was, impactful and it was cool. I can't say that over and over, but yeah, it was fun. The exchanges were, pretty entertaining here. And I think this was the first and I think only Sai match that properly impressed me to some extent in this tournament. Not to say he didn't have other decent matches or even good matches, but this was one of his few higher than just mediocre performances. So I gave this 3.25 stars to about 3.5 stars. Couldn't really pick my rating. And yeah, let's now move on to the main event for day 8. This was Miyahara versus Ishikawa. Both guys sort of went through the motions early on, but it wasn't like they were going through the motions and it was boring as it is with some wrestlers, because, it's Miyahara versus Ishikawa. Them going through the motions is still going to be relatively entertaining. And they were still also throwing in a few interesting interactions that you'd usually expect to see closer to the middle of the match. But the fact they were throwing them in early on was, it made for a more interesting start. And both guys were very arrogant and very eager to embarrass and just brutalize each other. And they took a lot of liberties with the rules to just grind each other down. And Miyahara, he attempted a beatdown and it didn't really work just because of the size discrepancy. When I see Miyahara trying to, get down and dirty and beat Ishikawa down, it just doesn't look believable. But then Ishikawa staged his own beatdown, and that was far superior, and I was really into that. And Ishikawa, when I think of great monster wrestlers, even though Ishikawa didn't have the best run here in the carnival this year, when he's on top, he is fucking on top. He's one of the best monsters in wrestling. Anyways, where was I? Back to the match. The natural dynamic of, the speedy striker versus the dominant powerhouse monster, that came to fruition as both guys did really well trading control, and they were both getting time to show off their offense. After 10 minutes, we were very firmly into the direct big move trading territory, and Miyahara, he was hitting all of his sweet knees, other little strikes, and Ishikawa, he was just obliterating Miyahara with pretty much everything he threw out. And the big move trading, it sadly became a bit formulaic, but I was still really enjoying all of Ishikawa's massive strikes and power moves, especially when he was hitting them in flurries. And, it would look like it was just totally crushing Miyahara, and Miyahara himself is very good at hitting flurries as well. And this is not the first time I'm going to criticize, have I already mentioned that? I can't remember. This isn't the first time I'm going to criticize Miyahara for being formulaic, so get used to it. But yeah, I did still obviously enjoy the work here. Ishikawa, he had to throw pretty much everything at Miyahara, including the Kamagoye, the running knee lift, the splash mountain bomb, and finally the giant killer Olympic slam. And that was only finally when he got the win after all of those other moves. And I enjoyed the work here, but as I said, it felt like guys were just running through the usual sort of sequences we all expected to see from them. And in the matches I've seen before between Ishikawa and Miyahara, I didn't see anything too new. It also just felt like both guys were holding back in certain exchanges, and I guess that's because, spoilers, Ishikawa is going to be challenging Miyahara for the Triple Crown title in late May, so it makes sense they'd hold back and, save the big exchanges for their actual title match. But yeah, a few of the exchanges here were slightly weak on impact or slightly off on technique, but there were still, more good sequences than there were disappointing ones. So I've given this one 3.5 stars. So final thoughts for day 8. I'd give this another 6 out of 10, so, the trend of decent shows continues. It was mainly just for the final 2 matches. I think others may enjoy Sai versus Zeus and Miyahara versus Ishikawa more than me, but I recommend them all the same. Day 9 was from Kanazawa Ishikawa, not the wrestler. We started off with Dylan James versus Yuma Aoyagi. This wasn't a bad match, but it was just a total victim of time constraints. Aoyagi's fiery, energetic performance was good as always, and James's offense was, pretty beastly as always. I just wish they got longer than 5 minutes because, what I did see I enjoyed, but not enough time to really develop anything. I gave this 2.5 stars. The next match was Sam Adonis versus Yoshida. So here we have the sneaky heel, Adonis, versus the aggressive powerhouse heel, psychotic heel, Yoshida. And we had both guys trying to out-heal each other, and there wasn't really anything in ring that was that interesting. It's a fun, more of a comedy match almost, I want to say. I gave this 2 stars, and I don't even mean to say it was bad, even though there is technically a bad rating. It's just this just isn't my style at all. Didn't do anything for me. Next match was Aoki versus Zeus. So there was nice evasiveness and speed from Aoki as he attempted to make use of his otherwise disadvantageous size. God, if I can get the word out. Sadly, Aoki's control work didn't last long, and Zeus was soon just totally dominating him with all of his usual holds and big strikes. Aoki's speedy comebacks were always very fun, and it was a nice change from Zeus's slower control periods where he's, applying his holds or just dishing out some slower, heavy strikes. And I do still enjoy that, but I like the dynamic of Aoki being speedy and Zeus being slower and, more focused on the heavy side of things. And Zeus's big strikes just continued to impress, while Aoki likewise continued to just impress with his dedication to continually surviving everything that Zeus was throwing at him and, selling and bumping like crazy. And eventually Aoki fell to the jackhammer. So this was a decent short match, and, as I said, nice dynamic of the powerhouse versus the intelligent, speedy, small guy. So I gave this 3 stars. The next match, the main event, was between Nomura and Yoshitatsu. Sadly, I did really end up enjoying this match, don't get me wrong, but the opening period was pretty bland. The match finally found direction as Yoshitatsu countered Nomura's attack off the apron, and then Yoshitatsu established control after that. And he looked quite strong while Nomura did a good job selling. And obviously, Nomura, he showed his usual great fire as he grits his teeth and he does his absolute best to just establish control despite his weakened state. And, he made his eventual energetic comeback, finally after ages, and it was just incredibly cathartic because, you see this guy, not only in this match, but in his other matches, always just on the receiving end of some really bad beatdowns. Then when he comes back, it's oh God, finally, I've been waiting for this for ages. So Yoshitatsu, he would regain control, and he started getting in a lot of near falls. And Nomura made these very exciting with his, extra late kickouts. Sorry, I probably annoyed you there by how many times I said that. And Nomura's second, even more energetic comeback was even more great. It was even better than his first. He was all fired up, and it was always close to putting Yoshitatsu away, but Yoshitatsu would always fight back just as Nomura would do before. And I just loved both guys at the end. They're just ragdolling each other with German suplexes to the point of collapse. And Yoshitatsu, I have my criticisms about him. I definitely don't think he's a bad wrestler, but he can be sort of dull, but he deserves a lot of praise here for just how good his offense looked. And his offense is also so varied. He has strikes, he has power moves, he has aerial moves, he has holds. He pretty much is an all-rounder, if I have to say. And his offense here especially was a lot quicker and a lot more impactful than usual. That's how I describe it. And I think this is perhaps the first time his offense has really resembled that of a top company star. This has to be his best singles match that I can think of, ever. And it was just a matter of big bomb trading and very dramatic near falls back and forth for quite a while in the finishing stretch before Nomura finally hit the maximum for the win. And yeah, this was just a very, very, very good match. I didn't expect these guys to have the chemistry that they had, and I was especially impressed by Yoshitatsu. Nomura obviously impressed me as expected. The finishing stretch was very dramatic, and it was just great seeing the support behind Nomura, so I gave this 3 3/4 stars. Really enjoyed this. So final thoughts for day 9. This was another 6 out of 10. So it looks at this point like All Japan has finally gotten out of that groove where they're only putting on totally mediocre shows, and now they're putting on just all right shows. That's what a 6 out of 10 is. It's oh, that's okay. That's better than mediocre. That's all right. So that rating of 6 out of 10 is mostly just held together by the very good main event. The only other worthwhile match I'd say was Zeus versus Aoki, and even that was disappointing just because it wasn't very long. But yeah, if you're looking for another recommendation from this night, I have to say Zeus versus Aoki. But Nomura versus Yoshitatsu, look, it sounds bad on paper, but genuinely, I recommend checking it out. For day 9, the show was from Hamamatsu and Shizuoka, and the first match was, hey look, I wonder if there's a reason why they're putting Gianni Valletta in all these opening matches when he has to wrestle on the shows. I wonder if it's because they want to get the bad stuff out of the way first. So we had Valletta versus Okabayashi, and look, this was a caps lock God, I almost messed that up. This was a caps lock Valletta special. God, if I said an Okabayashi special, be like, hey Lewis, what the fuck are you implying? You think, Okabayashi is a bad wrestler? Which I don't, for the record. I think he's fucking great. But yeah, this was Valletta finally, sadly, getting his first of 3 wins in the tournament. And obviously that was all done to tie up points for the final days of the tournament, to make, everything dramatic, like, oh, will Okabayashi go forward? Oh, if only he had beaten Valletta, then he would have been, top of the table. Yeah, I gave this 2 stars, which I guess is slightly better than Valletta's usual output. Okabayashi was fine, but even he couldn't really make this match. Like, you have to have a good partner to have a good wrestling match. I don't believe you can just carry absolutely anyone. And yes, this was a bit disappointing, wasn't that into it, 2 stars. The next match was Aoki versus Aoyagi, 2 very similar names, which I'll hopefully, be able to distinguish as I talk about them. Aoki once again impressed with his offense. It consists of usual speedy evasion and aerial attacks, as well as here a larger focus on limb targeting as he went after Aoyagi's arm. And as usual, Aoyagi's offense was unspectacular, at least outside of his aerial based attacks, but the genuine heart he showed was just enough to hold everything together. And the transitions between the two became quite smooth and led to some pretty exciting sequences that highlighted both guys. So I didn't really expect that, or because I think, oh, Aoki's great obviously, but Aoyagi a bit too not very polished in the ring. But yeah, they impressed me. And Aoki eventually managed to roll Aoyagi up for the win after suffering through 2 German suplexes, and luckily he narrowly avoided the third, and yeah, he got the win. So this was a decent match. Sadly, yet another match in this tournament which should have gone longer, would have benefited from maybe an extra 3 to 5 or even 8 minutes. Yeah, I gave this 3 stars, and this was Aoki's final, this was his first win. He had finally broken his 0-win streak. And what day is this? It's day 10. So yeah, took you long enough, Aoki, but you totally deserve it. The next match was Joe Doring versus Yoshida. So this was the monster powerhouse versus the small powerhouse. I guess that's how I describe Yoshida. In Dragon Gate, he's not really a powerhouse because he's still rather small, but you know what I mean. He's more beefy. So yeah, Yoshida, he tried to prove his credentials as a beast, but Doring's just struggles off everything, and he just easily began dominating Yoshida. Doring's work was fine, definitely better than it's been in some of his more recent performances. This was, one of his stronger ones, but Yoshida was much more interesting in control just because he delivers all of his attacks with much more energy and just a much more interesting display of character through all of his screams and expressions. And I understand that people don't like Yoshida explicitly for that reason, that he's so animated, but to me it just makes him very distinct. And it's I prefer someone being more animated than not doing anything like, what Doring's doing over here. There was a pretty awkward finish as the ref was expecting a kick out from Yoshida upon, taking Doring's crossbody. Obviously the ref hasn't been watching, the tape's been like, hey dude, the crossbody from Doring, that's his finishing move now, you need to count that. So yeah, the ref didn't count that, and then Doring, he got the pin after having a second crossbody, I think it was, or maybe it was a lariat, I can't really remember. So yeah, this was actually a decent powerhouse match, but given the abilities of both guys, especially Doring, I really, really hope to see way more. The next match then was the main event. This was Daichi versus Suwama. Daichi controlled for quite a while with his strikes, and then Suwama took control with his much larger strikes and big holds. Sadly, the interactions here weren't very high energy. Daichi could make for a decent babyface if his fire-up yells weren't so feeble and silly sounding. I've seen a lot of people who have been covering the Champions Carnival comparing him to Ospreay, and I don't think it's actually as bad as Ospreay, but it is very noticeable because when you have your hero, when they're screaming out in pain and being weak, you still want to appreciate them as being strong. But when I hear you screaming like a little girl, like with Ospreay or, Daichi, it's way more off-putting. And obviously, Ospreay has so much more upside to his offense, it totally makes up for, his few, weak screams. But with Daichi, who just goes through the motions, and on top of that, he has, these random little girlish screams, yeah, it doesn't really help out. Sadly, the interactions here, they weren't very high energy. I can't remember if I already said that or not. Sorry, just looking at my notes. It was always awesome seeing Suwama just smash Daichi with suplexes and strikes, but we never really got a proper 50-50 exchange between them, so things never really felt too evenly matched. And as I said before about Suwama, he really needs someone who can go toe-to-toe with him to get the best out of him. And Daichi, he remained the underdog consistently, just surviving everything that Suwama was throwing at him and getting a few comebacks, but I could never really buy into his actual odds of winning, which in retrospect I really should have, especially with some of the losses Suwama had already taken, I think, and or at least would continue to take in the tournament. And yeah, Suwama eventually got the win with a bridging backdrop suplex to finally end the match. So this ended up being a decent match, mostly just because of Suwama's performance, and Daichi himself, to be fair, he wasn't bad, but he didn't add too much. So I gave this 3 stars. So final thoughts for day 10. It was 6 out of 10. It was another pretty middling, show of the carnival. Absolutely no blowaway matches, but pretty much everything was decent, and there was only one outright bad match. Daichi versus Suwama, I think maybe there are a few people who would have enjoyed it more than me, but I feel like 3 stars was generous. I haven't seen anyone really, praising this match or, let alone praising any of Daichi's performances. So, yeah. Day 11, this show was from Tokyo. I can't really be bothered clicking on Cage Match to figure out which arena or stadium it was from. We started with Aoki versus Sai. So there was great movement and speed from Aoki as always, because, he's going up against, the massive striker Sai. So obviously he needs to move around quickly to avoid those big strikes. And Sai, he seemed motivated here, just like in his match with Zeus. And he's delivering his strikes with a lot of energy, and he's even making his holds more interesting with just the way he's pulling on them and the way he's tugging. And even his expressions, he was making, a lot more of them than he usually would. And it was fun watching Aoki survive everything in stages comebacks, and it was equally fun watching Sai just destroy Aoki with everything he was throwing at him. And it was a very cool feel-good moment in the finish as Aoki, he only gets his second win of the tournament thus far as he rolls Sai up, just as he did in his win over Aoyagi. So yeah, enjoyable match, basic story, told well. I gave this 3 stars. The next match, this was Valletta versus Ishikawa. Yeah, Valletta match, moving on. To be fair, despite my dislike of Valletta, he does play like an important role in giving guys a break from the more hard-hitting schedule of matches that they have. If you're Ishikawa, you're like, okay, who am I up against today? Is it Zeus? Is it Miyahara? Oh, thank God, it's Valletta. So, I don't have to take things too seriously. And it is important having a spoiler guy who can, beat anyone and tie up the points for drama on the final few days. So even if I don't like Valletta's matches, I still appreciate the role he plays. So I think this is Valletta's 4th 1 3/4 star match. Like, God, that's got to be a record for like all-time bad performances in a tournament. Then we had Lee versus Yoshida. So this was, a nice big strikes from Lee, and we've got Yoshida. He's working his usual fun brawl style with his own few decent strikes. The strikes just continued to increase in intensity, and there was like nice desperation shown by Lee as he got closer and closer to putting Yoshida away after Yoshida had survived all of his attacks, but he was still never really managing it. And then we had a nice submission finish for Lee, which was a bit surprising. He applied sort of like a single leg Boston Crab, and then with his free arm that wasn't applying the Boston Crab hold, he took an arm wrench sort of hold at the same time. So yeah, that was decent, and I gave this 3 stars. Then for the main event, we had Miyahara versus Aoyagi. So we have the 2 Next Stream boys going up against each other. And I think Aoyagi is technically like the last guy in Next Stream who is still with Miyahara. Like Jake Lee left, then I believe it's pretty definite that Nomura is gone, I think. And yeah, so Aoyagi going up against the much more polished Miyahara. So we got a nice few spots from Aoyagi, early on. And Miyahara, he probably gained control, like eventually, obviously, because it's Miyahara. You don't expect him to, like, even if you are up against Aoyagi in the main event, you don't expect Aoyagi to be dominant for, like, the first half of the match or whatever. And it was very fun watching Aoyagi just slowly put together these comebacks. And he started making the best of, like, every opportune moment he could get. And Miyahara, obviously, he started bringing out his big knee strikes and his flurry attacks. And Aoyagi's selling was very sympathetic because, as I've said over and over, his offense itself is, pretty bland. But when it comes to selling and, being passionate, he's very, very good at it. And Aoyagi, he hit a dragon screw leg whip on Miyahara on the apron at one point. And he would follow up on that leg, like, whenever he was desperate, because it's like, oh, Miyahara's getting some offense in on me, I guess I'll stamp on the leg or, target it. And that was a nice bit of storytelling, but, it's Miyahara. Sorry, how else can I say this? His selling was rather bad, as it sadly always is. I shouldn't say always. Like, his real-time selling, is good. But when it comes to selling a body part, Miyahara is not the best. And Aoyagi, he was getting a bunch of very, very close near falls, and he maintained his, never say die attitude. But Miyahara was just determined to put Aoyagi away, and he just kept hitting him with all these big bombs. And this was a pretty good match in the end. Miyahara obviously got the win. Miyahara's big moves were great, but his selling was bad. It's just outright bad. And Aoyagi still doesn't have a distinct in-ring style, but still, he just works so well with that charismatic underdog character. So I gave this 3 1/4 stars. So my final thoughts for day 11 of the carnival, another 6 out of 10. It looks like, All Japan, this isn't just a blip. This is like 5 or 6 shows in a row where it's like, this is decent. Still not blowaway shows, no like really must-see shows, but it's decent. The only totally skippable match was Valletta versus Ishikawa. Everything else was decent, and the main event was pretty good, but still nothing too special. Day 12 was from Sapporo in Hokkaido. We started with Adonis versus Yoshitatsu. This was another match where Adonis, he isn't exactly bad, but he just doesn't bring anything too interesting. And this was only 8 minutes, so to be fair, it didn't really have too much time to do anything too interesting anyways, so I gave this 2 1/4 stars. The next match, Dylan James versus Yuji Okabayashi. This was very highly regarded in the All Japan community. So there was a long general test of strength at the start with both men, being very evenly matched. And eventually the big beefy strikes started coming out. And from there, the match became like a pretty typical modern Puro, strong style match, I guess I'd describe it, with the trademark fighting spirit included. And it was certainly formulaic, but it was still very, very fun. Just watching both guys just totally smash each other's chests and, knock each other silly. It's just great. James was very impressive with how he sold his exhaustion and how he constantly had to take these extended breaks just to catch his breath and focus, and then he'd go back right back to just slamming into Okabayashi's chest. It was great because both guys never ever gave up their dedication to throwing out chops, and it felt like they were going for a bit of a Kobashi versus Sasaki vibe with just how dedicated they were to just continue throwing out those chops. And they it eventually started hyping themselves up as well as a means to deter their exhaustion and aching, because it's damn, I'm losing focus, I need to psych myself up or else this dude's just going to get me. And so it was cool. Not only are these guys being incredibly stiff, but they're also hyping themselves up at the same time. So you got energy physically as well as from their characters, just seeing how dedicated they both are to just never dying. After what felt like 20 minutes, I was pretty certain this was going for a 30-minute draw, because both guys are just running through the same sequences that they'd already performed. And that doesn't say I didn't still enjoy them, but it did feel like they were definitely just trying to stretch things out and pad things in for time. And look, you just have to respect two guys who are just hammering away at each other for essentially 30 minutes, full 30 minutes, since there has to be one of the most physically grueling ways to do a draw. You think to I don't know, you think of a Ric Flair draw from the 90s or something, or the 80s. How much of that time is actually spent hitting moves as opposed to someone selling on the mat or on the outside, or applying a hold. Whereas these dudes, they're not taking a break. They're just fucking throwing everything at each other. So yeah, massive props to that. Also, massive props to Dylan James, because in those very few final seconds, I was actually second guessing whether he would shockingly tap out at the very last moment just for a swerve. But that wasn't the case. But the bell rang and it was a draw. But the fact that James had me double guessing myself, I was props for that. Dylan James really impressed me in this tournament. So yeah, this was a very good match, far better than the totally boring draw we got between Ishikawa and Sai. It was definitely formulaic, as I said, but it was still very fun with that formula. James showed a very impressive range of his acting abilities here, and I thought he was definitely the one that made the match feel more character driven outside of just the beefy striking. And Okabayashi himself, obviously he was very good, but he really needs a crazy balls to the wall strong style match for his charisma to really shine through. But obviously I still thought he was really good. It's just the match was a bit more slowly paced than other strong style matches that Okabayashi has been in before. So I gave this 3 3/4 stars. The next match was Redmond versus Suwama. We got the usual technical work from Redmond, with Suwama eventually bringing out his big bomb strikes and power moves, and kind of shockingly, Redmond would roll Suwama up for the win. And I popped quite big for that, just because, I'd really appreciated Redmond's work thus far in the tournament. It wasn't blow away, but it was nice to have this, change up every now and then of this, this Gaijin who comes out and does, his cute little quirky, technical work. So I enjoyed that. Yeah, I gave this 3 stars. I would go a bit more in depth, but I'd just be saying, it's technical work versus, powerhouse work. You pretty much get the idea. It is decent, nothing you really need to see, but, decent enough. Then we had Daichi versus Nomura, and I think this was Daichi's best match of the tournament, and, it makes sense. He's up against, fucking Naoya Nomura. So there were some basic exchanges early on before both guys started trading strikes, and it was really fun because the conviction of both guys was clearly showing through, and it really felt like they were actually competing to outclass each other, because if I'm not mistaken, I think they're about the same age, so it makes sense why, they're both trying to, I guess, outcompete each other in this instance. Daichi came across as far more compelling here than in any of his other performances thus far in the carnival, probably just because he finally had a total babyface who could put his offense across more than usual, because Daichi's been up against other people. I think he may have been up already against some guys you consider typical baby faces, but Nomura is just so expressive and passionate that I don't think you can have a match against Nomura where he doesn't start making your offense look good just because of how good he is. Yeah, so I was enjoying this, and Nomura, he can, as I said, he can put your offense across more so than usual, and than the usual person you expect. And he also just had someone who could equally trade big strikes at a decent pace, just like Nomura himself. So that's why a lot of their strike exchanges were pretty fun. And in amongst all these great strikes, we actually started getting some great power moves and some great near falls as well. And that has been Nomura's specialty the entire tournament. So it was good to see that continue here. And Daichi, he finally got the win after a pretty great looking Shining Wizard, to be fair, capping off what was his best performance of the tournament, up against Nomura. So pretty good match, but I'm a broken record. This could have been great if it went longer and if it had bigger stakes, although to be fair, I feel like if the match went longer, we would have started seeing Daichi become a bit more slack. So who really knows, but I did give this 3 1/4 stars. For the main event, we had Valletta versus Miyahara, and this was actually the first decent match from Valletta. So yeah, he's had some very bad performances thus far, but and I know it's just him playing his character or whatever, but this was his first actually decent match. And yeah, like I have very many criticisms about Miyahara, but damn, if he didn't have a single bad match in this tournament, and I don't know if he's ever had like a single bad singles match. Now that I think of it, is that possible for Miyahara to have a bad match? Like he can get formulaic and stale, but a bad match that like from Miyahara. That just doesn't sound right. Anyways, there was lots of drama here as to whether Valletta would continue his late run in the carnival of, beating all these top guys. I believe it was Ishikawa and Okabayashi he beat. Would he continue to beat the ace because he's really, ramping up his cheating aspect to win? And shockingly, he managed to do so. And I totally bought into the drama because I was really like, oh God, please don't have this fucking idiot Valletta beat your ace. Like, even if I don't like my Miyahara that much, I still like him, but, I don't like him that much. I still don't want, Valletta to, sully the Triple Crown or whatever by beating the ace. But yeah, he ended up winning. And just the fact that I bought into so much of the drama, this ended up being a decent match just as a result. Like, there was nothing about the match that was, technically impressive, but it was just very fun. So I gave this 3 stars. So final thoughts for day 12. Look, what do you expect me to say? You're right, 6 out of 10. There was nothing outright bad. Adonis versus Yoshitatsu was forgettable, but it wasn't offensive or anything. And James versus Okabayashi is a very highly recommended match. And then the other 3 matches were all pretty decent. And hey, who expected it? But Valletta finally had a decent, watchable, worthwhile match. So shout out to him for that. For day 13, this was from Sapporo Hokkaido as well. I'm just checking my notes. So for the first match, we had Redmond versus Yoshitatsu. Redmond, he had his, usual technical stuff, and Yoshitatsu, he surprisingly performed some good technical work himself. I didn't really expect to see that. And the pace slowly increased with both guys getting their signature moves in, and this was unremarkable, but it was charming because both guys committed to their technical style, and then they developed past that. So I gave this 3 stars. Then we come to Daichi versus Doring. So these are technically the 2 worst performers in the tournament up against each other. So Doring, he's slowly running through his strikes and power moves without any real effort, and Daichi, he shows effort in his strikes, but outside of that, it's just not very compelling overall. Doring eventually hits a flying crossbody for the win. This was totally forgettable. It was doing the bare minimum to pass as a match, so I'm only giving this 2 stars. The next match was Okabayashi versus Zeus, and look, I love Zeus, and Okabayashi had many great performances this year, so I was generally expecting like a match of the year contender here. So we got big strike exchange immediately, and things slowed down as Zeus sort of gained control and wore Okabayashi down with various holds, both legal and illegal, and Okabayashi's eventual comeback and Hulk up moments were fantastic. Zeus was hanging with him, showing his own great determination with, as they traded chops, but Okabayashi, he set things off, and, props to both guys, but Okabayashi, I don't love him as much as Zeus, but he was really just looking fantastic here. I loved, both guys were just getting in each other's faces, staring each other down, and they just refused to stop ever, chopping the shit out of each other. It was sort of similar to Okabayashi versus James, but just because I can buy into Zeus as an not really an underdog, but just a very endearing babyface, I can buy into him way more than James, so that just really upped this match. Okabayashi and Zeus, they're just both so charismatic and passionate. It's just damn awesome. And the strikes were done. And then we start moving into getting these massive, beefy, beastly power moves. And that was fantastic as well. The strikes eventually came back after both guys were worn out from, all the power moves. And God, they were even more powerful than before. It was crazy. And Okabayashi, he had to demolish Zeus for quite a while before finally putting him away. And it was a real shame because I absolutely love Zeus, but Okabayashi is awesome as well, and he was fantastic here, so he really did deserve the win. This match was super fun. This was the first properly great match of the tournament in my books. Controversial opinion there, and I may need to rewatch this one given the praise it's received is very high. It's got a 9.06 on Cage Match, but at the time I felt this was just 4 stars. It wasn't even my favorite Zeus match of the tournament, for the sake of it. But yeah, I thought this was great. I gave this 4 stars. For the main event, we had Lee versus Suwama, and I was hoping this would start off just as fiery as we had with Zeus and Okabayashi, but instead it was both guys sort of going through the motions for 5 minutes, but, there wasn't a major issue, although it did weigh things down a bit, but, it wasn't the death knell of the match. I think that's the right term. So yeah, both guys' strikes slowly came out, and they very slowly improved in intensity. Lee was a bit awkward for a while, but eventually his great knees and kicks came through, which made up for those few shortcomings, and Suwama's selling was, strong as usual. As I said, I've been saying it for a while now, around in Suwama's few latest performances that I've been reviewing, he needs like a top star to really bring the best out of him. And with someone as stiff, with his offense like Lee, that's what we got from Suwama. He also just made Lee appear even more threatening than he already was, because, as I said, Suwama's selling and his general bumping, even at his age, was just so damn good. Lee dominated for ages, but eventually Suwama made a very fiery comeback, and you could just see the determination in his eyes as he was smashing Lee all over the place with lariats and power moves. And I love the way that Lee looked totally gone in those final few minutes as Suwama just hit power move after power move, and eventually Suwama got the win with the bridging backdrop suplex. It's kind of funny. I think both guys have a backdrop suplex, don't they? Yeah, I think they do. Was it a side suplex for one of them? No, I think they both actually have a backdrop suplex. Anyways, this had a slow start, as I said, but it definitely picked up immensely in the final 10 minutes, so I gave this 3.5 stars. So, final thoughts for day 13. This was actually... You think I'm going to say 6 out of 10? Well, no, this was a 7 out of 10. This was likely the best day of the tournament ever since the very first day. We had the best match of the tournament thus far in Zeus versus Okabayashi, and a very fun main event with Suwama versus Lee. And for the other matches, look, Daichi versus Doring, obviously avoid that. It's not worthwhile at all, but Redmond versus Yoshitatsu was decent as well. So this was the strongest day ever since day 1 in my books. Day 14 was from Sendai Miyagi. We started with Daichi versus Yoshitatsu. I've got to point out, how I mentioned how Valletta is in all the opening matches for, when he's on the shows? That's also the fact with Daichi. When he has a match, he's usually always in the opening match as well. I wonder if All Japan knew, why would they book him in the first place? Maybe I'm just this is a conspiracy theory, but as if they knew, okay, if we're going to have this guy, he's probably not going to work that hard, so we should also put him in the opening matches to get the stink out of the way. So yeah, Daichi versus Yoshitatsu. This was the usual Daichi special with an uninteresting Yoshitatsu to add. So it wasn't bad, it was just boring, and that's the case with all of Daichi's performances pretty much. It's not like he's being outright bad. You compare him to maybe half of the WWE roster, and it's oh yeah, he's average. But this was just nothing. This was 2 stars. Next match was Aoki versus Valletta. This was the Valletta special, but luckily Aoki was there, and he has his infectious babyface energy and charm, so that added a bit more stakes, and luckily he ended up getting the win. So this was kept to 6 minutes, which is this is the perfect length. This is the absolute maximum length for a Valletta match. I don't need any Valletta match to go over 6 minutes. So yeah, this was fine. I gave this 2.25 stars, mostly just because Aoki's in the match, and I like Aoki. The next match was Sai versus Okabayashi. I wanted this to be immediately fiery, just like Okabayashi's matches against Zeus, Ishikawa, and James. Instead, it took a while to get going, but Okabayashi was great once he did start, finally unleashing his offense just as expected, and Sai was decent when dishing out his strikes, but there were still a few times where he wasn't as explosive as Okabayashi, so he couldn't really match him in intensity, and that was a bit of a shame. And Sai eventually hit a pretty sick running knee to get the win. That's been his finisher pretty much throughout the entirety of the tournament. So yeah, I thought this match should have gone longer, or at least I thought it would have gone longer, and I wish it had, because I was just getting into the match just as it was really getting good, but then as it was just getting good, it ended. So it was only 10 minutes. So it was a decent match in the end, but there could have been way more effort from Sai. Okabayashi, he was pretty good. He probably could have done a bit more as well, but this was mostly on Sai. Anyways, as I said, decent match, 3 stars. The next match was between Dylan James and Shuji Ishikawa. This was seriously disappointing. This was in the main event. I really expected this to be one of Ishikawa or James's usual massive monster, stiff strike fest, power moves all over the place. There was some low effort brawling and striking around the area to start, and we didn't really get any proper strong style staples here. And I would have at least appreciated the cliche strong style staple spots, since they would have at least made the match a bit more interesting than it was. The power moves and strikes were still decent, but there was nothing that was at the level of, say, James versus Okabayashi or Ishikawa versus Okabayashi. Maybe it's just because maybe James and Ishikawa are terrible wrestlers and it's all on Okabayashi. Nah, unlikely, guys. All 3 of these guys, Okabayashi, James, and Ishikawa, they're all great. They have all had great strong style, quote-unquote strong style matches in this tournament. But for some reason, James and Ishikawa here just didn't really work that well. We didn't even really get any proper 50-50 big bomb trading sequences either. And that was a real shame, because when you get 2 big beefy guys, you want to see that sort of stuff. But sadly we didn't get that. Ishikawa, he was hitting some pretty decent power moves at the end, and both guys were trading some pretty decent strikes in the finishing stretch as well, but there was nothing that had the intensity that as I said, there was no intensity matching, say, James versus Okabayashi or Ishikawa versus Okabayashi. And on paper, this match should have been 4 stars minimum, I want to say. But James eventually hit the chokeslam for the win, and that brought this fine but ultimately very disappointing match to an end. So I gave this 3 stars, and my final thoughts for day 14. 5 out of 10. We went through the period of the 5 out of 10s, then we moved up to the 6 out of 10s finally, then we got like our first 7 out of 10 since the first day, now we're back down to 5 out of 10. This was definitely one of the more skippable nights. Like the last 2 matches were all right, but unremarkable. The first 2 matches were rather bad, or at least pretty boring. Nothing too noteworthy from this day. Day 15 was from Nagaoka Niigata. We started with Doring versus Redman. At this point in the tournament, I basically lost interest in Redman's technical work. Like, it was still decent, but he was just hitting the same spots and sequences over and over in every match. And I get that, like, for normal people, unlike us Western pro fans who are like watching every single day of the bloody tournament, like when the wrestlers go to these different towns and they put on their performance, obviously they don't want to change things up too differently, because like imagine if you're like a stand-up comic, are you really going to change your entire routine like to just because, I need to give the people in Delaware something different to the people in Texas or whatever. Like, you're not going to do that, so it does make sense. But for someone like me who's watching all these shows, I was really like losing interest in Redman's work, and he was still good, but I just couldn't really get into it. And obviously with this match, it didn't help that Doring was the opponent here. He gave another half effort, like maybe even quarter effort performance, I want to say, and he actually got the win with his flying cross body, even though he probably didn't deserve it. Even if I am a bit bored with Redman, he did still deserve the win much more so than Doring. So this was 2.25 stars. The next match, this was Jake Lee versus Sam Adonis. Adonis continues to do his thing, and it's fine. Lee threw out some decent strikes and power moves, but he never really intensified anything, likely just because it's Adonis. He's not really the sort of opponent you can do that with. I don't even know who got the win here. Who really cares? This was 2.5 stars. The next match was Atsushi Aoki versus Yuji Okabayashi. This would have been way, way better if it was longer. Aoki tried his absolute best to take Okabayashi down with his speedy movements and unexpected counters, which, I've come to love Aoki for all throughout this tournament, but Okabayashi just continued to totally crush him over and over and bully him all over the place. Okabayashi eventually got the win pretty quickly at 8 minutes after getting the Argentinian backbreaker, and that got him the submission win. So this had some good foundations, but the match never moved into being what I'd really consider to be like a proper match. It was a nice teaser of things. I would have liked to see maybe a rematch later down the road in the year. Probably won't get that, but I can wish. So I gave this 2.75 stars. For the main event, we had Miyahara versus Sai. So Miyahara, he went through his usual motions and control early on, and then Sai started working Miyahara over with a mixture of kicks and holds. We got a few short big bomb trading sequences, they were pretty exciting. Usually with Miyahara hitting his knees and then Sai hitting his kicks, but they sadly never lasted long enough to properly build up the match's atmosphere. And Sai's selling was pretty impressive here, especially the way he would sell by like how he's being rocked by all of Miyahara's massive knee strikes, and the pace was picking up, and both guys were very close to putting each other away. And I was half surprised to see Miyahara kick out of Sai's running knee, because Sai had won quite a few of his carnival matches thus far with that running knee, but I guess being the ace gives you perks like that. And Miyahara eventually got the shutdown German and picked up the pin. So yeah, this was a decent match, though it didn't really feel like I was seeing anything new from either guy that I hadn't seen before. And this was Miyahara running through all of his usual spots and sequences, all of his flurry attacks and everything, and Sai was pretty much doing the same, so I gave this 3 stars. So this was once again a 5 out of 10 show, another of the more skippable Carnival night shows, nothing really worth watching except maybe the main event, just, for the implications on the block standings, and, maybe you're really into Miyahara. If you are, this was his usual affair, so you probably would have enjoyed this more than me. For day 16, this was the first of the 3 final nights at Kurikan Hall in Tokyo. The first match was Ryuji Sai versus Aoyagi. So Aoyagi, he jumped Sai like right away, but Sai was pretty comfortable. He's like, okay, you've jumped me, but I'm gonna like immediately like gain control. And then he started wearing Aoyagi down with his usual kicks and general beatdown. And there was very nice fire shown by Aoyagi as he flew around trying to take Sai down, only for Sai to just fire back with even stiffer kicks and bigger power moves. It's like, oh god, Aoyagi's really trying hard here, but the more he tries, the more he's getting back from Sai. We got a bunch of crazy close near falls all over the place from both guys, which is constantly posing the threat of this match just ending at any second. And Aoyagi, he managed to lock in his guillotine after rolling out of Sai's suplex, and he got a pretty shocking submission win. And it was especially cool because Aoyagi, he had the guillotine, and then he stepped around Sai while holding the guillotine hold in place. And that sort of, I guess the idea is it increased the torque on his hold. And I think it's almost similar to like a Peruvian necktie, if you know that move. I think that's the right move I'm thinking of. And as soon as he stepped forward and kayfabe increased the torque, that immediately got him the tap out from Sai. So this was shortish at only like 11 minutes, but it was very entertaining with a clear story of Aoyagi, constantly fighting the uphill battle against his larger, stiffer opponent, and the pace in the final 5 minutes was very fun, so I gave this 3.25 stars. The next match was Atsushi Aoki versus Dylan James, and look, I may be crazy on this, but I really, really, really enjoyed this match. So immediately the story is established with the massive Gaijin monster James going up and just throwing Aoki all around and hammering him down. There was fantastic, like world-class selling from Aoki, as he just showed like the immense pain James was causing him, and he was just, bumping very well as well, and he was just showing how easily this massive James could just throw him around and slam him everywhere. And James was relentless. He did a fantastic job playing up his size and power advantage, and I especially enjoyed Aoki at one moment. Like, he's been taking like all these power moves and strikes, he rolls out of the ring, then he rolls under the ring, and he goes to the other side where James is, because James is on one side and Aoki is then, you understand what I'm saying. If you've seen the match, like, I'm explaining this terribly, but the point is Aoki is in a very, dominant surprise attack position, and then like we get some crazy close near falls. Like, I was biting on pretty much all of these near falls as Aoki starts going for these surprise roll-up pin attempts, and it felt like Aoki's best chance of winning was gone because James had rather shockingly survived all of those random little roll-ups, and then James just continued his fantastic job of just unleashing all these beastly fucking strikes and power moves, yet somehow Aoki was just continuing to get back up to his feet or kick out of the pins. He was just so determined to win. It was incredibly endearing, and just like with me, this crowd was totally 100% behind Aoki, and I was just so damn happy at this moment. Aoki finally managed to roll James up after countering a chokeslam, and he got the win. Like, and the crowd popped big for that. I popped big for it. This was a very, very good match with a very, very well-told story. Well-told story with great performances from both guys. I gave this 3 3/4 stars. I feel like I'm the high man on this match, but yeah, in my books, this was very good. If they went longer, as my catchphrase, if they went longer, this could have been even greater if there was like a way more drawn-out story of James totally dominating Aoki before Aoki finally got the shock win. But yeah, as it was, this was very good. The next match was Ishikawa versus Zeus. So there's great passion shown by Zeus as soon as the match begins, as he's immediately unleashing all these big strikes and trying to take the much larger opponent down. And it's just fantastic the way Zeus puts all these extra little gestures or expressions alongside all of his big movements. It just makes them all feel much more realistic, because you're not just seeing this guy do these athletic things, you're also seeing like, the expressions and the passion, the character on his face, or the little gestures he makes. It just makes him feel like a much more like well-rounded wrestler. Like, he's not just a wrestler, he's actually a person fighting here. And Ishikawa finally managed to break free from Zeus's grasps, and he started his comeback, which involved just beating the absolute hell out of Zeus with massive strikes. But obviously Zeus still managed to come back and continue hitting his great looking strikes, and then both guys are just going 50-50 on massive strikes and power moves, and it was outstanding. Like, especially from Zeus, who's just showing this crazy strength as he's lifting Ishikawa up for all these massive suplexes. At one point he deadlifts him, I should say. He just straight up deadlifts him from the top, the second top rope for a bit of a superplex, and it's like, god damn. Like, I know Zeus is fucking like jacked to the gills, but holy shit, the fact he can do that to Ishikawa, someone who's like 6'3", fucking massive, may even be taller than that, it was just incredibly impressive. And this isn't like your usual just, it's people, throwing out stiff strikes, because first of all, Ishikawa, he does have character, but I'm more impressed by him just by how incredibly stiff his strikes and power moves are. And then with Zeus, he's incredibly athletic, he's got incredibly stiff strikes, and he's just got so much fucking babyface charisma. It's just fantastic. Ishikawa, he brought out his even bigger power moves, and Zeus was just getting all sorts of absolutely crazy 2.99 kickouts. Both guys had just pushed each other to the absolute limits, and it was just never totally clear who was going to win, because you're trying to say, okay, who's in control now? Does this, give us an idea of who's going to be in control in 2 minutes time? And I could never really judge that. The second big strike exchange was Zeus just totally unloading, and he ended up basically just clubbing Ishikawa down. It was fucking beautiful. And then Ishikawa went back to hitting all of his crazy power moves once again. Zeus somehow survived a fucking running knee lift with a 1 count, and then he kicked out of the second follow-up knee lift, which I was certain was going to end the match, because that's the thing, like, you kick out of one move like at 1 count because like, that they have one last rush of adrenaline, but then they fall to the move or the follow-up move that comes next. But no, Zeus then kicked out of the second running knee lift at 2, and then I was like, okay, fuck, my boy Zeus, he's going to win, he's going to end up going to the finals. But sadly, Zeus eventually fell to the giant slam as Ishikawa very slowly, like, it was painful to watch. He just slowly lifted Zeus up, and Zeus is trying to escape, but then Ishikawa just, he falls back, he hits the move, and he gets the pin. This was easily match of the tournament thus far for me. I loved this. The intensity and the physicality was just off the charts. To me, this totally surpasses Zeus versus Okabayashi, which was still a great match, but I guess, even though I think I prefer Okabayashi more than Ishikawa, just because Okabayashi is a bit more animated and energetic, Ishikawa doesn't need to be energetic to have an amazing performance, just because his physicality and his offense just speaks for itself. It was fantastic here, and I do think he actually played a bit of a better powerhouse monster role here as opposed to Okabayashi, who was still good, still great, remind you. Plus here, Zeus was even more fiery and sympathetic than in his match against Okabayashi. So I gave this 4 1/4 stars. As I said, I love this match. I'm really surprised this match isn't as high on like cage match, like Zeus versus Okabayashi, which was still a great match. That's got like 9 point or whatever, like 9.06, and Zeus versus Ishikawa only has like 7.9. It's like, what the hell is wrong with you people? This match was fucking awesome. This is one of the best matches of the tournament. God, I don't understand people sometimes. Sometimes you guys disappoint me, okay? You guys better have given this match like 4.25 stars minimum, or you're not allowed to listen to the podcast anymore. Now we come to the deciding match for Block A. This is Miyahara versus Okabayashi. So Zeus, in losing his previous match, he's out of the running to win Block A and go to the final. So I was pretty disappointed on that. But I was, I'm like, okay, who cares about that? We got Miyahara versus Okabayashi, the big match, say, for the final day of Block A. This should be good. Well, it shouldn't just be good. It should be fucking fantastic. And sadly, I know you guys are probably already disappointed. Like, why is he saying he's barely even started reviewing this match? Why is he saying sadly? But yeah, sadly, I didn't enjoy this match as much as I expected or as much as other people have, mostly just because, I'd grown very weary seeing all these Miyahara performances, which were, never bad, always usually pretty, always very, always very good. I've worded that terribly, but, never bad performances, usually very good. But, it just became evident to me through watching all these matches back to back from all these, days, like one after the other, that Miyahara has a very, very clear formula. And I was always aware of this. I know how the Miyahara match goes. He'll get a bit of, work early on, then he'll do his outside brawling thing, but then his opponent will eventually take over and he'll be beaten down for a while. Then we get the bomb trading, and that works for a lot of wrestlers. Like even Okada, he has a very clear formula, but for some reason it just really works for him, and I really connect with him. But with Miyahara, just seeing that formula over and over, which is what makes it a formula, it just sort of wore down on me. Anyways, let's actually get into the match. So Okabayashi, he's pretty easily in control for the majority of the first 5 minutes, and he was just beating the absolute hell out of Miyahara with strikes, holds, power moves, pretty much everything. Like if Miyahara was taking something from Okabayashi, it was destroying him. And what I loved about Okabayashi here was just how he made all of his holds as well just look disgustingly painful. Like, his arms look like fucking tree trunks, and just the way he administers the hold and the way he gets so hyped up while he's pulling all these wild facial expressions while applying the holds is just super exciting. And Miyahara, obviously, he's placed as the underdog as a result of this, and he did well selling Okabayashi's offense while staging his, flurry attack comebacks every now and then. And Okabayashi remained incredibly impressive as he just continued beating Miyahara down, even applying an Argentinian backbreaker, which he has used as his finishing move, quite a few times, remember. And he applies the hold, and then he walks around, and I believe he faces 3 of the 4 different sides of the ring toward the crowd, and that was pretty cool. And it looked like Miyahara was totally gone, although of course, we viewers, we know if a wrestler looks like they're totally gone and out, and they're actually, pretty high up in the pecking order, just like Miyahara is, we know he's eventually going to get a pretty big comeback, and that did eventually happen. And then we suddenly saw the big move trading sequences come out at a very frantic pace, and the big moves continued being traded for quite a while, and I sadly couldn't buy into any of Miyahara's near falls because I knew none of them had come from his shutdown German, which is the only way he ever finishes his matches. So I still at least enjoyed the general physicality and intensity, but I couldn't really buy into any of those near falls as opposed to what I can with what I could do with Okabayashi, because I know that he has quite a few moves he can finish his matches with. Okabayashi continued to absolutely destroy Miyahara with fantastic lariats, but of course Miyahara, being the ace, meant he would kick out of absolutely everything that Okabayashi threw at him, and he'd just keep staging comebacks. And what was really, really awkward was that Miyahara, while it's meant to be the big dramatic moment at the end, he's fighting for the shutdown German, and Okabayashi's trying to fight it off, but because Miyahara is grabbing the tights, he ended up basically almost totally exposing Okabayashi's nuts, just because he's pulling the tights all to one side as he's trying to apply the hold, and you can see it's like, oh shit, how can I, it's meant to be a dramatic moment, but how can I focus my, oh shit, is Okabayashi's dick about to come out? And yeah, his nuts are, you can see the side of his nuts, or I guess, the bit between the actual ball sack and the thigh. This is great wrestling talk right now, but yeah, and that, I feel like the fans noticed that as well, because I did hear a very odd reaction. It was already a dramatic moment, but I felt like I heard a bit of laughter, or a bit of people going oh god, we don't want to see your fucking generals Okabayashi. I mean, I'm sure there probably were some ladies and maybe a few men in there who did want to see that, but yeah, and just as I believe Miyahara finally actually gets the hold, before he actually lifts Okabayashi up, I believe Wada Kohei, the ref, I believe he then actually but almost noticed that Okabayashi was almost revealing himself, or Miyahara, I guess, was almost revealing Okabayashi, and he seemed to almost hit Okabayashi in the nuts, which I assumed was actually him trying to cover up Okabayashi just for his sake, and also for the company's sake, and but yeah, I feel really stupid mentioning this, but yeah, I wasn't I didn't think the match was great. I thought it was very good, and then we have that unintentionally humorous moment at the end. Yeah, I guess that just represents my ideas on this match. Very good, but a bit weak at moments, but still, as I said, very good. But yeah, Miyahara, being Superman, he ended up getting the win following that shutdown German. And as I said, while I really enjoyed this match, it felt super formulaic. I really enjoyed Okabayashi just destroying Miyahara all the time with those massive lariats and power moves, and I really enjoyed Miyahara's crazy, quick, impactful knee strikes and his flurry attacks. These guys had really, really strong chemistry. But in the final 5 minutes, despite it being like very fun, it was also very repetitive just in how we not only just because they're going through like big move versus big move, but we're also seeing like pretty much some of the exact same big move versus big move exchanges copy and pasted, especially with, the same near falls following up. So not only was it just, we're seeing the same, like the idea of the same strike versus strike, we're seeing the exact same strikes and power moves one after the other. So that didn't help. But yeah, as I said, the formula, I just like the formula, but the formula itself is always very good. Like I am annoyed that the fact the formula exists, but the formula itself is still enjoyable. I think I've repeated myself enough, but yeah, so I did still enjoy this match. It was still very good. I gave this 3 3/4 stars. For my final thoughts for day 16, this was the most consistent night of the entire Champion Carnival for 2019, though it wasn't necessarily the best, so I gave this 7 out of 10. There was no match at all under 3 1/4 stars, and we had 2 very good matches and a top 10 match of the year for me. So yeah, if the main event was slightly less formulaic, I probably would have gone 8 out of 10 for the show, and it probably would have easily been like far and away the best show of the entire tournament. But we're actually coming up to now what was in fact my favorite day of the tournament. This is day 17. Once again, this was from Tokyo in Kurikan Hall. We started off with Adonis versus I was going to say Taichi. This was Sam Adonis versus Daichi Hashimoto. So Daichi, he had the chance to win his block here, and that would have been awful because if he won the block, then he would have gone through to the finals, and I don't want to see Daichi in any sort of position like that, at least not now. But there wasn't even any drama in Daichi potentially winning or even in his eventual loss. Like, the match was fine, but it wasn't long enough to build up any real interest in Daichi's chance of winning, and it was also just so obvious in the first place that Daichi wasn't going to win because, he was never positioned as someone who's having all these, blow-away matches or having a bunch of main events, so I never believed he was going to win. Yeah, so that didn't help, but they did have some fine interactions. Adonis had picked up his game more towards the end of the tournament. He was less being like a pure heel. He had actually become started being a bit more respectful towards his opponents. So as a result, his offense itself started improving, being a bit more like, a normal wrestler, not just a guy who's, trying to get cheap heat. So I gave this 2 3/4 stars. Wasn't anything too special, sadly. The next match was Yoshida versus Yoshitatsu. This was the same deal as Daichi versus Adonis, as Yoshitatsu, he also had a chance to win the block here, which likewise would have been a pretty poor choice. Probably less poor than if they chose Daichi. Luckily, they chose neither. And again, there was just not much drama. I never believed that Yoshitatsu had a chance of winning because, the idea of him going to the finals is just ludicrous. And yeah, so this match again, like it was fine. Like, he's going up against Yoshida, and at this point Yoshida, I believe, only had 6 points, and I was like, okay, Dragon Gate are not going to send any of their guys to another company if they're only going to have 3 wins and 5 losses. So that also helped with, I already knew Yoshitatsu wasn't going to win, but it was okay, that solidifies it. Yoshida's totally getting the win here, and his performance was fine. Yoshitatsu probably showed a bit more fire than Daichi did, but yeah, I still only gave this match 2 3/4 stars, just like Adonis versus Daichi. Then we come to Doring versus Lee, and once again, this was Doring's chance to win the entire block. He probably gave... Oh, actually, I was going to say he gave less of a fuck than Daichi and Yoshitatsu, but to be fair, this match was decent, and I do think he showed, this is one of those few matches where Doring did show a bit of fire. So Lee was immediately pushing Doring to his limit with his knees, but Doring pretty quickly established control, and he started wearing Lee down with his own strikes and holds, and Doring's work was very lumbering, and as I've said, it was devoid of energy, just as it's been all tournament long, but I actually sort of came to appreciate Doring's style, and I know it's funny, oh, you finally appreciate his style this late in the tournament, Lewis, but yeah, because it felt like his power moves, strikes, and holds, they were also slowly utilized and performed, because it was as if he was hitting heavy strikes with more power behind them, as opposed to, like Miyahara, who hits all these very quick moves, but they're not as impactful because he doesn't have as much weight behind them. But with Doring, it felt that way, and so I was actually sort of able to finally get into his offense. But I genuinely do believe this was the first time where it wasn't just his moves were like just heavy and all those other times they were, but I didn't pick up on that. It actually felt like he was more focused with how he was executing his moves. Anyways, Lee would stage a few comebacks, but Doring would pretty much always quickly reestablish control and put Lee back in the underdog selling role, which Lee did a pretty good job at, and I really, really enjoyed. This was the thing. Lee, he avoided Doring's flying crossbody, which, as we know, is the finishing move, and he also avoided quite a few lariats from Doring, and then Lee hit his own backdrop suplex for the win. So the finish itself didn't look super impressive, but the idea of Lee being dominated for so long and finally managing to get the win after his agility allowed him to avoid Doring's finisher and then hit his own finisher, it made for a pretty enjoyable story. And so this put Lee into the contendership for winning the B block. So yeah, the match on its own wasn't super exciting, but it told a nice little story, and yeah, it was enjoyable enough. This is also one of the few good Doring performances, as I said, so that deserves a mention. So I gave this 3 stars. The main event, or at least what I assumed was going to be the main event, was Naoya Nomura versus Suwama, and holy crap, All Japan match of the year thus far. This was fucking insane. This was my favorite match of the entire tournament. Look, I've been building up Nomura's fiery babyface performances and selling so much this entire review, and goddamn, it all came to fruition here. He was fantastic. Nomura showed so much fire early on, but Suwama, he was very quickly putting him down, and he was starting to get really aggressive in how he bullied him. He was like also mocking him, like, you know, like talking shit as he was beating him down and really getting in his face, and Nomura's babyface selling was just fucking fantastic, especially up against such, you know, a determined old grouch like Suwama, the old guard of All Japan. Nomura finally managed to properly break through Suwama's defenses, and from there they just started going 50-50 big time. Both guys were showing a ton of offense, hitting a lot of great moves without ever really like fully going into like quote unquote big move trading territory. It was just like very well paced moves without going into, you know, sort of spot fest territory. It's just, you know, a big move here, a big move there. None of it's overkill, and it's just all incredibly dramatic. I loved how much passion these two showed when trading strikes or holds. It was as if they knew, like, okay, we're both representing, you know, the different eras of All Japan, and like it was like, okay, therefore we have to give like a match that represents you know, an aura of that significance. And Suwama's lariats and power moves just had such a vicious power behind them. This was just like Suwama's performances in the Violent Giants versus Strong BJ matches, and Nomura was selling his damn heart out. He was totally getting across the idea of how he's constantly flirting with defeat, but always fighting back with everything he has. And I loved Nomura barely being able to get up his feet to like to get up onto his feet to even face Suwama, just because he'd taken so much damn offense from Suwama. It looked as if like I expected Nomura to get the win, but at moments Suwama was just so dominant, and I was like, okay, I don't think Nomura can come back. And so I was like, okay, I guess I better prepare for Suwama going to the finals and putting Miyahara over. But no, Nomura was just showing god levels of fire here, especially when he like basically no-sold Suwama's power moves and brought out his forearm flurries, which I always pop big for. He always, like, those are the best parts of Nomura matches. When he brings out those forearms, it's like, you know, like it's like a development on the Miyahara forearm flurries. They're just so passionate, and he just delivers them at such a vicious pace with so much energy behind them. And yeah, I just fucking love this match. There were also plenty of great near falls in the final few minutes before Nomura finally hit the maximum for the win, and I popped big time. Those near falls, I was like I was so connected to Nomura here. I was like, holy shit, Nomura, please pull this out. And yeah, my boy fucking did it. This was outstanding. This was even better than Zeus versus Ishikawa. This had fantastic physicality, absolutely fantastic heart from both guys. Great selling all around. I still gave this 4.25 stars, just like I gave Zeus versus Ishikawa, just because it felt like this match, like obviously the physicality, like the pure physicality was probably better in Zeus versus Ishikawa, just because, you know, that's like a pure strong style match, but this match had so much more heart, and even though they're about the same, I slightly prefer Nomura versus Suwama. So yeah, I thought this would put Nomura through to the finals against Miyahara, where he'd finally get his win back, but what happened next was we had Jake Lee versus Nomura for the B block playoff final, because, you know, I thought, okay, All Japan, they'd have Nomura go through to the finals since he did beat Lee in their block match. So even though they were even on points, you know, this is what New Japan does in the G1. But then I looked on Wikipedia, and it turns out that at least since 2000, which is the final date I can see the data for, wrestlers tied on points in the Carnival will always have a playoff match, even if they had defeated either of each other in the normal block matches. So, and that is a cool idea, to be fair, because, you know, it provides more opportunities for story development, because then you can have guys either get their win back if they lost early on in the blocks, or you can have one guy just go 2-0 against a guy and, you know, be very superior. So I had fears that Nomura's incredible performances would go to waste with Lee beating him here, so I was extra invested in this match right from the start. And we were immediately off to a hot start, because despite both guys having already wrestled tonight, especially Nomura, he'd only had a 10-minute break compared to Jake Lee's like almost an hour break. Jake Lee was immediately taking it to Nomura, and as I said, I was 100% pulling for Nomura, because, you know, he's the total package to me, and it was heartbreaking just seeing Lee immediately smashing him with all sorts of stiff kicks and knees, and Nomura spent a lot of time lying down just selling the effects of Lee's attacks, and that sounds boring, but it was super compelling, because we're forced to just watch this poor dude who's worked so hard, just had an outstanding match, probably for some people a match of the year contender against Nomura, and then he's immediately, you know, thrown back into the deep end. It's like, God, how much more sympathetic of a babyface can you get with Nomura than how he is right now? And Nomura, of course, he eventually got a comeback. Before then, all he could really manage was just a kick out of Jake Lee's pin attempts or reach for the ropes when he's in Jake Lee's hold. But he did eventually get a comeback, and it wasn't very energetic because of how exhausted he was, but that didn't really affect anything because it was still super compelling because I totally bought into the story of his struggle. He's trying his absolute best to fire off with his amazing offense, but he's just so fucking worn down from Suwama, and then Lee immediately pouncing on him. It's like, god damn, what's he got to do? And Nomura was fucking killing me with more of those 2.99 kickouts that he was also showing in the previous Suwama match, and Lee once again brought out his super stiff strikes to finally try put Nomura away. Nomura hit his second and most exciting forearm flurry of the entire night, even more so than it was in the Suwama match, but Lee sadly eventually managed to hit the backdrop suplex and then a running knee lift for the win. And I was fucking crushed when Nomura lost. I was like, holy shit, when you have just a connection to a wrestler and they lose? Like, for the longest time I watched All Japan, especially when Miyahara was on top, I was like, I really enjoy this, but there's no one I really connect with. But fucking Nomura, this dude who's like 24 or 26, like, holy shit, I connect with him so well. Yeah, he was fantastic. As I said, I was crushed when Nomura lost. I was like, goddamn, gotta sit down, a bit depressed now. I was like, okay, Jake Lee versus Miyahara, that could be good. Maybe Lee will win. But, I guess it's still great because even though I'm so disappointed, even now when I'm thinking, goddamn, Nomura lost and I saw him lose, the fact I was so invested in Nomura's potential victory, that speaks volumes for just how well booked Nomura has been like the last year and just how great this match was. This was probably my second favorite match of the entire tournament. Once again, this was superior to Zeus versus Ishikawa just for the pure story. Like, as I said, the physicality of Ishikawa versus Zeus, that would have been superior, but just the story behind this match. And what's funny is, as I mentioned at the start, Lee and Nomura in the blocks, they only had 12 minutes. And my note at the time was, if they get longer, then they'll probably have a way better match. And this match probably wasn't that much longer. It was also only about 12 minutes, but it was far superior just because of all the story that, All Japan had given us throughout the entire Champion Carnival. And yeah, I just love this. Lee played like the perfect badass stoic killer, and Nomura was like, of course, perfect. He's weakened yet a determined underdog. He didn't want to give up, but eventually he couldn't help but be put away. I gave this 4.25 stars. This was slightly less entertaining than Nomura versus Suwama, but both matches were fucking gold for me. Definitely my two favorite matches of the entire tournament. So final thoughts. I didn't expect this by the final hour, but this show actually ended up being the best day of the entire Champion Carnival tournament. So I gave this a 7 out of 10. It was very, very close to an 8 out of 10, more so even than I was to giving an 8 out of 10 to the previous day. But if those matches outside of the final two matches, Nomura versus Suwama and Nomura versus Lee, if they were better, those matches outside of that, then I would have given this an 8 out of 10. But sadly, like, only 2 of the 5 matches we saw were like really, amazing, and they were like, match of the year contender level, sort of. So yeah, if we didn't have those like 2 3/4 star matches weighing it down, I would have been way higher on this. It was also just disappointing that there wasn't much drama with Daichi, Yoshitatsu, and Doring in their matches, since they all technically did have a chance in kayfabe of winning the B block. But yeah, they didn't really play that up, so that was also a missed opportunity, even though with those 3, I don't think you can really build up a credible case for them winning, and therefore I don't really think their performances would have been, like, if they were trying to get across the idea of, I really have a chance of winning, I probably wouldn't have bought into it that much anyways. But yeah, that was all more than made up for with the, oh god, I'm losing my voice, with the final 2 matches, which just showed like the absolute range of human emotion from Nomura with those 2 great and totally different matches with totally different opponents in Suwama versus Lee. And now, God, I've almost been going for an hour 40 minutes. My voice has been run raw. We are finally onto the final day, day 18. So this was the finals. This was Kento Miyahara versus Jake Lee. So quickly, some pre-match thoughts. Sadly, I got spoiled on the result due to I was on Extreme Wrestling Torrents and someone posted an Wrestling Observer episode and they had Miyahara in the title. So I was like, okay, well, if he's in the fucking title, then I know he pretty much won. So yeah, fuck you to that guy who didn't think, people are still downloading the finals. Maybe I should just blur this name out and, say Champions Carnival, even though if that wasn't the actual title that the Observer uploaded it with. But yeah, to be fair, I would have been surprised if Lee did win anyways, because he hadn't struck me as someone that All Japan were properly building up at the time as a serious contender anyways. So the history here in this match is that Lee, he had previously been a part of Miyahara's Next Dream unit, so there's a bit of, story of old friends turned rivals, and there's also history with, I don't know if I mentioned this, but Miyahara, he had been the champion during the last 3 Champions Carnivals, so he'd been the Triple Crown champion, that is, but he'd never actually won the Champion Carnival tournament itself, despite being the ace, for just as long. So let's get to the match itself. So there was a slow start before Lee just started unloading a bunch of heavy kicks that easily took Miyahara down. This was basically just like the match from the previous night, the playoff, with Lee versus Nomura. Nomura, and it was great seeing this immediate aggression from Lee, especially because he always backs it up with like this very appropriate offense, very stiff offense. And Miyahara was very quick about hitting all his usual spots as soon as he regained control, and the match was still relatively slow at this point, but we were still seeing a lot of interesting phases, and we continued getting a few big individual spots, including some that took to the outside. And then back in the ring, the big move trading just finally came out, and Miyahara was of course great hitting his frantic flurries where it's a knee followed by a suplex followed by a knee, and Jake was great still hitting his heavy strikes, especially his kicks and knees, which continue to be super impactful. And I was enjoying both guys going 50-50, but throwing big bombs and getting near falls. But once again, my usual criticism, it felt a bit formulaic, just like most of Miyahara's latest big matches. And it was still quite cool, of course, but I wasn't seeing anything new or outstanding. This felt like, how can I really, okay, there are a few storyline differences between, this match and, say, Miyahara versus Okabayashi, but at the end of the day, it all feels so similar, especially Miyahara just running through everything that's the same. That all did change. Things did change a bit where Lee hit, a series of stiff kicks and then a running knee and then a backdrop suplex, and he still failed to put Miyahara away. But even then, even though that did change things up, that's still totally in line with Miyahara's big matches where, the opponents throw absolutely everything at him, and it looks like, okay, if Miyahara's not done here, then this is totally overkill, and Miyahara still kicks out. And yeah, Lee was awesome with how crazy stiff his offense was, and he seemed totally focused. It was okay, even because, as I said, sometimes I can lose interest in Lee, but here it was okay, he's cold and calculating, he's really trying to focus on how to put Miyahara away. Yeah, and I was thinking, okay, we're getting some really great last, nanosecond kickouts from Miyahara, which he always does well at, and then Miyahara's comeback was, of course, very speedy and captivating, but again, I was just getting annoyed at how damn formulaic it was, because it's just him hitting knee after knee after knee, not adding anything new, maybe throwing in a German suplex, and as much as I like Miyahara, it feels like he literally only has two moves, the damn blackout knee strike and the German suplex. And, he executes those moves fucking perfectly, but it's damn dude, can you please throw in some other signature moves, just develop your arsenal a bit? Anyways, Miyahara, he eventually got the win after hitting the shutdown German, and thus his reign of terror continues. So this was a very good match. As I've said to death, it was very formulaic, but still very enjoyable. Miyahara is very good, even when he does stick to his done-to-death formula, and Lee did really well, showing a more reserved but still evident determination, and that fit well alongside his powerful offense. He still could show a bit more emotion, especially in really matches like this with very high stakes, but I thought he did good. I thought he did well. I'm still hoping to see more from him if he does continue to get pushed, but yeah, very good match. I've given this 3 3/4 stars. Just for my final bits of this review, I'm going to give my thoughts going forward on the Champions Carnival and, the result and what I think is going to happen. Then I'm also going to run through my top 10 matches and my most disappointing wrestlers and my most impressive wrestlers. So, thoughts going forward. I did say before that Miyahara is having a, quote, reign of terror, and I mean that jokingly, obviously, but I really do struggle caring about All Japan when Miyahara is just so heavily pushed as the top guy. And look, I get that he's the ace, he's a great wrestler, but there is no harm in having Miyahara have a competent rival who can at least match half or a quarter of what Miyahara himself has done. And I honestly think that the concept of a singular ace is just overrated. There's no reason a promotion can't still tell stories without focusing everything around one guy. Especially when you can have two quote-unquote aces in the short term and still establish a true long-term ace. You can give Nomura the title for, say, 6 months for every 12 months that Miyahara has it. Is that such a big deal? And, that's just me throwing out some random ideas, because as much as I enjoy Miyahara's work, I've honestly lost faith in him just because of how formulaic his style has become. And I get that it's sort of ironic because I'm becoming formulaic, bringing this up all the time, but I just can't help but focusing on it. And yeah, I'm just getting really desperate to see All Japan finally push some other guys. And obviously, look, we saw Nomura and Lee, they were getting really strong pushes in this tournament, and I do think All Japan is setting up for either of Nomura or Lee to finally get the title, probably within the next year. So I'm definitely excited for that, but if it doesn't come soon enough, then I am going to really find it a struggle to follow the promotion, even though they're probably still going to have plenty of great matches. But that's a similar issue to what I have with New Japan. They're putting too many eggs in the Okada basket, except here it's the Miyahara basket. And I'm pretty certain All Japan, they probably see Nomura as the next star over Lee, just because even though Lee did make it to the finals, I'm certain that was probably more so done to keep Nomura away from Miyahara for longer to build up for Nomura's eventual win over him. And it was also Nomura, remember, who was the one positioned in the main event on the second to last day, who had to, go in the playoff matches with only 10 minutes rest, compared to Lee, who had an hour. And, that made Nomura even more sympathetic than Lee, especially since, you have to remember Nomura's match against Suwama was outstanding, whereas Lee's match against Doring was, it was fine. And now that Miyahara has finally, in his 4th attempt, won the Carnival while holding the Triple Crown title, I imagine All Japan's probably going to go for a dominant ace run where he holds the title for a relatively long time. I think the first time he held it for It was 400 plus days, so they may try to equal that or even go longer. And if they don't, like if he just loses to like Ishikawa or Zeus or whatever, like in a few months, then that's a really bad decision in my opinion, because why would you make your guy so dominant by holding the top company title, then finally winning the top company tournament, and then have him lose like a few months later? That just wouldn't make sense to me. So for his list of potential challenges for the Triple Crown following the carnival, we have Ishikawa, Valletta, and Zeus. And Valletta has already been announced as, oh, sorry, God, imagine that. Sorry, I meant to say Ishikawa, not Valletta. Ishikawa has already been announced as the next challenger for May 20th, and I fully expect Miyahara to get the win, just as I expect him to likewise beat Zeus and also Valletta should they get challenges as well. And I don't really expect Valletta to get a challenge just because, you know, he cheated to win. It would sort of be like how Yano didn't get a challenge against Omega, even though he beat Omega in the G1, and that was because of cheating. But yeah, if Valletta gets a challenge, then goddamn, that'd be terrible. But yeah, Miyahara versus Ishikawa, very excited for that. I hope they make up for their underwhelming, though still good match in the Champions Carnival itself. And I hope there is also another Miyahara versus Zeus match. I would love for my boy Zeus to win, but for the long term, I think it makes sense for Miyahara to go on this ace run. Even though it does pain me, I think, okay, just have Miyahara, if he's already so dominant, just keep him like that, and that can make for a great story as you slowly build up Nomura and Lee, and ideally you have Nomura win the title like by the end of the year, please, for the love of God. Either way, I'm probably still going to follow All Japan just for Nomura. Like, obviously, you know, Zeus, Ishikawa, Okabayashi's not really there, but you know what I mean. Also, who have I said? Zeus, you know, they're all good. Obviously, I'm still going to follow the promotion. Just had a few issues with Miyahara. Still think he's great. Still really appreciate the guy and everything he's done for the promotion. Yeah, anyways, let's get on to my top 10 matches of the tournament. I was going to go through like my special mentions, which would be like an extra 8 matches, but you know what? This show's already gone on long enough, so let's start. So, number 10, I had Nomura versus Yoshitatsu from day 9. Number 9, I had Okabayashi versus Miyahara from day 16. That was the A block final. For number 8, I had Aoki versus James from day 16. For number 7, I had Zeus versus Miyahara from day 4. For number 6, I had Lee versus Miyahara from day 18. That was the finals. For number 5, I had Okabayashi versus Ishikawa from day 1. For number 4, I had Zeus versus Okabayashi from day 13. For number 3, I had Zeus versus Ishikawa from day 16. For number 2, I had Nomura versus Lee from day 17. And for number 1, I had Nomura versus Suwama from day 17, which was by far my favorite match. It was very closely followed by Nomura versus Lee, but for me, just Nomura versus Suwama, goddamn, that was amazing. That's like easily in my top 5. I think I actually have Nomura versus Lee at number 6, and I think I have Zeus versus Ishikawa at number 8, and those are in like my total match of the year list for 2019. So yeah, final thoughts on the Champions Carnival. Oh wait, I actually haven't given my, I haven't given my thoughts on the most disappointing and most outstanding wrestlers, so I guess I'll just do that now. We'll get the negative out of the way. I'll start with the most disappointing wrestlers. So, the most disappointing wrestler. So for honorable mentions, I've got Adonis and Valletta, and I'm not counting them really just because they were brought in to be unlikable heels who played spoilers. So I can't really, consider them disappointing because I never expected much from them in the first place. So for the actual disappointing wrestlers, first of all, we have Daichi Hashimoto. He had plenty of plotting matches where his strikes were, they're stiff, but his performance outside of that wasn't very interesting, and a lot of the time he just didn't look to have cared. And even when it looked like he was like trying to show that he cared, you could still tell he's not like putting in any effort. But yeah, my most disappointing wrestler was Joe Doring. The majority of the time, he did not look like he cared at all. He would just lumber around the ring, throw half-effort strikes and power moves, and he'd sell without any real energy or conviction. And I'd probably choose Doring for the most disappointing wrestler in this carnival as opposed to Daichi, just because Daichi, he would at least pretend to care. Whereas Doring, he very clearly didn't seem to care at all. Like, he didn't look at all as if he had any motivation. It also didn't help that a boring performance from Daichi at least requires Daichi showing some like physical energy, even if he doesn't seem personally invested in the match. Whereas Doring, he seemed to lack both. It's a shame because both guys proved to have had, some decent performances at times, but either they just couldn't keep that up or they were carried the majority of the time. So yeah, Doring, the most disappointing wrestler in this tournament, followed closely by Daichi Hashimoto. Now, for the most outstanding wrestler. So, honorable mentions, I've got Okabayashi. He was a great monster powerhouse with crazy infectious energy. For Miyahara, despite all my criticisms, the majority of his matches were good. And, even though to my mind he didn't have any outright great matches, which I'm sure like some people will totally scoff at, he certainly had many matches that I considered very good. As I have Miyahara, he had 3 of my top 10 matches. So, as I said, all my criticisms, you can throw them out the window because, the dude is still great. Then we have Zeus. He continues to be an amazing powerhouse with great athleticism, and yet he was still an incredibly endearing, passionate babyface. So yeah, Zeus also had 3 of my top 10 matches, including my number 3 and number 4 ranked matches. And now, my most outstanding wrestler, I haven't kept it well hidden, it's Naoya Nomura. I thought for ages that this dude was way better than Takeya Nomura, the guy, the kid from Big Japan, who basically, I like him as well, but let's be honest, guys, he only has stiff strikes going for him. That's it. And look, after this Champion Carnival, I've finally been proven right. Nomura from All Japan, far superior to Big Japan Nomura. Nomura showed the greatest amount of heart I've seen from a wrestler in a while, and his offense is fantastic because he's got great impact and his timing is so perfect. He also had 3 of my top 10 matches, including my number 1 and number 2 ranked matches, so he was easily my pick for 2019 Champion Carnival MVP. The only real issue with his run is basically just that he didn't make it through to the finals and win the entire thing. That's really my only criticism, and you can't lay that on him. That's got to go up to management. So now, my final thoughts. This Champions Carnival, I keep calling it the Champions Carnival. It's the Champion Carnival. Get it right, Lewis. You've been talking about it for almost 2 hours. You should know the name. Anyways, this Champion Carnival for 2019, it was a real struggle to sit through at times. But there were quite a few very good, great matches and a handful of, great and even fantastic matches sprinkled all throughout that did make it, pretty enjoyable to follow throughout. It was pretty rewarding, I'm trying to say. And the final 3 days made for a very good finishing stretch. I have to give the tournament overall a 6 out of 10 just because of how difficult some of those undercard and midcard, block matches were to sit through. Plus quite a few underwhelming main events and, particular matches on paper that should have been great, but just didn't end up being that. I would still recommend you watch the tournament, but certainly not in full. Who knows? I probably will. If this podcast is still going at least, then I'll probably still cover the entire Champions Carnival next year as well. As I said, still recommend checking out the tournament. If you really want to follow all the big matches, I'd recommend just going on Cage Match and see what has made it into the match guide and what other people have rated, or just check out the matches that I've recommended here. So yeah, we have finally come to the end of this massive review of the All Japan Champion Carnival for 2019. We are now going to ideally be back to a regular review upload schedule. I'm going to be covering New Japan's Wrestling Dontaku shows, and I'm also going to be covering the big matches from New Japan's various smaller shows, including Sengoku Lord and some of the matches, the title matches from the Wrestling Dontaku Road 2 shows. I'm also going to be covering those. I'm also going to be reviewing Dragon Gate's Dead or Alive show, which looks to have a very interesting card. I believe that's day after Wrestling Dontaku, I think. And there's also Noah's Global Tag League, and I feel like I may cover that if I can be bothered, but who knows with my work schedule, by which I mean my all the wrestling I have to watch. So yeah, thanks for listening, guys. I'll just plug everything. So you can check out the podcast on YouTube, Podbean, and iTunes. There will be links in the description, or just search Pure Grade Puroresu. You can follow me on Twitter at Pure Grade Puro. That's Pure Grade Puro. Yeah, thanks for sticking with me, guys. Sorry for the long layover. I hope you understand that it was all, I was all just doing that just because I needed to focus on the Champions Carnival. I didn't want to bother watching anything else and reviewing anything else. I just want to be so dedicated to giving you guys the best coverage of the Champion Carnival. And now I've done that. All right, guys, I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. See you next time.